Hello! This video is made possible thanks to your support, and it starts with the main character not sleeping all night and arriving at the adventure house at dawn. But something seemed different here. The phone rang. The boy decided to see what it would say. The system met him in the house of adventure. In life, they weren't husband and wife, but in death, they were buried in the same grave. You need to collect shouts from adventure house visitors, who can exchange them for rewards. The number of shouts you can collect varies from level to level. The protagonist eagerly awaited today's visitors. A girl named Xiao Wan ran to meet the boss. She was the adventure house's all-round staff. The boy asked the girl what had happened and why she had run so fast. Xiao Wan told the boss that they had visitors. She just heard a lot of people talking about the adventure house at the park entrance. There was even a line of people waiting to buy tickets to enter their adventure house. Visitors were eager to see if the adventure house was truly haunted. One said she hadn't been able to watch the live broadcast, so she watched the replay and was still scared. The protagonist thought that it seemed like many people had come here after watching the nightmarish mission live last night. The live stream really was effective. His phone was full of messages from people wanting to come here. The boy started scrolling through information about the Zhujiang Adventure House on his phone. There were numerous messages in which people discussed the events at the adventure house in horror. The protagonist told Xiao Wan that he updated the dark marriage scene yesterday and would personally apply makeup to her today. The girl was very surprised that her boss knew how to apply makeup. Then they entered the dressing room. The boy realized that with everything he had, he could only do basic makeup. What an antiseptic game. Xiao Wan asked her boss again if he really knew how to apply makeup, and if he could do it properly. She asked him not to make her look ugly. The protagonist laughed and asked the girl not to worry. He promised her he wouldn't. The boy asked Xiao Wan to open her eyes and look in the mirror to make sure she was satisfied. And so the girl stood up to her full height and began to look at herself. He asked if it was really so beautiful, and that was why she was silent. Xiao Wan said she'd never seen herself so beautiful, but she looked like a corpse. The protagonist asked her to stop staring. He was ready to open the door right now. The boy asked me to hurry to the second floor of the dark marriage stage and not to forget to take a Bluetooth headset with me to receive his orders. He asked why the house wasn't open yet. The first thing to do was go to that adventure house. The boy exclaimed to the visitors that they had been waiting for this for so long. He invited everyone to begin a bizarre adventure through the adventure house, the horror of which is limitless. One of the visitors said he came to visit to find something. Was it him who posted the short video last night? Various shouts could be heard from the crowd. Someone shouted that being scary was funny. He could die if they hit him. The visitors were ready to buy tickets. They were there to play. The protagonist laughed and exclaimed that everyone was so enthusiastic. No problem. Let them line up for tickets, and everything will be fine. The boy decided they could go in first. He greeted them and said they were law students at Zhujiang Medical University. His name was He Sheng. He introduced his older sister, Gao Jie. One of the visitors said he posted a video of them last night, and it went viral. The older sister said she wanted to check it out. The protagonist replied that they would see everything now. Tickets are usually priced at $20, but for a limited time they're offering a $10 discount. Bags can be left on the counter and then proceed inside. The owner of this adventure house must be scared, but the visitors noticed he was very confident. Before they began the game, the protagonist asked to tell them a few things about the scenario. Is there a security risk? They weren't married in life, but when they die, they'll be buried in the same grave. There's a story that's been passed down in Zhujiang for many years. Once upon a time, there lived a prince named Ping Jiang, who wanted to give his child, who died young, a wedding in the underworld. After consulting a fortune teller, he finally chose a girl based on her birth date. But this girl's heart belongs to another. To force her to submit, Ping Jiang's warlord pushed her lover into the river, threatening to kill the girl's family. He was thus forcing the girl to submit. After all, it was simply necessary in this scenario. But finally the girl agrees to marry a dead man for the sake of her parents and is buried alive in a sealed coffin with a bloody candle and a varnished coffin. But after the wedding, strange occurrences began to occur in the residence. Copper chickens began to bleed, papermen began to open their eyes, and every midnight, a strange female voice began to haunt the residence. It's a short scenario. All they have to do is find the exit and get out within 15 minutes. If they're really scared, they can yell at the monitor and it will come for them. And then some of the visitors decided to hurry inside. He simply had no patience left. The boy wished the children a good time. The brother asked his older sister to wait for her. The boy thought it looked like a lamb entering a tiger's mouth. The brother asked his sister to slow down, and they heard a strange sound. The girl asked her brother to hurry, as they only had 15 minutes. They noticed music playing in the house and thought the boss was very caring. The brother told his sister that the music was too creepy. The sister reassured her brother and said it was just a silly song. The girl told her brother that she would go first. He asked her to walk more slowly. The nurse asked Hishang why he was so cowardly. What a disgrace to the medical school. But my brother explained it by saying that the music was a little unclear. A voice was inviting them in. It was dark there, only thin rays of light and ominous music. It was very eerie. The color filtered through the crack in the door. The door creaked open, and the brother and sister began to enter the room. The most interesting part was just beginning. Heejing said that he felt like this house had become even more creepy. The girl asked her brother to go inside and look for clues. She was more courageous and decisive. Heesheng replied that he would stay here and asked his sister to be careful. The girl said he was an adult and believed in ghosts. She thought it was simply ridiculous. The guy explained he was simply trying to keep track of the escape route. The girl thought about the white damask in front of her, 5 feet off the ground. No one could hang themselves. Tables and chairs are scattered, and evidence of a struggle still remains on the ground. The haunted house is a deliberate attempt to create the illusion of a violent suicide. This room is occupied by the maids, and the stern spirits won't spare even the servants. The girl thought it was a complete mess. It seemed they were planning to torture everyone in the mansion to death. The girl said that the haunted house was very well designed, and there could be other clues hidden around it that they are looking for. She suggested that he should go and lift it to see what was underneath. The boy told his older sister that he couldn't. Then the girl exclaimed that she would do it herself. She wanted even more adventure. She lifted her white veil with a bold, sharp movement. Her excitement grew more and more intense. There was some person underneath with a mask on his face. Who is it, a person or a doll? The girl was lying on the floor. Her eyes were very frightened. Her brother started screaming like a chicken, clearly out of his mind. Her sister exclaimed that it was just a paper doll. Wasn't their school's morgue scarier than that? The brother replied that his mother said that ghosts are afraid of the crowing of roosters, and he was trying to exorcise the ghosts. After all, his sister had told him there was nothing to be afraid of here. When he tried to continue the conversation, the girl asked him to shut up. Wasn't he a medical student? Why bother remembering what his mother said? What about scientific thinking? The girl regretted going into the haunted house with him. She exclaimed that they needed to find a way out quickly. Time was running out. The girl tried to open the door. It creaked very loudly. A burial was taking place inside. Some people were standing around, and white clothes were scattered about. They stood like corpses along the walls. The brother told his sister that these paper dolls seemed to be watching them. He thought they were moving. His sister asked his brother not to panic and to go in first. The boy said he didn't see anything resembling an exit, and that it was a locked room with nothing in it. The sister replied that the owner of this adventure house was a master of psychological suggestion and mind reading, so they have to go another way. The more they think it's impossible, the more they search. The girl called her brother and asked him to help her open the coffin. The boy asked his sister to let him go. He admitted he was a weakling, but these paper dolls seemed to smile at him. My sister began to examine these dolls. They really did look alive. The paper doll seemed to be smiling. Beads of sweat began to trickle down the sister's face. These dolls stood alongside the coffin where the burial took place. She couldn't understand how this was possible. It must be a psychological effect. Medical students can't give up. There's nothing here, so the exit must be in this coffin. The boy was very scared, and his sister still wanted to open the coffin. The girl told her brother that if he was a man, he should stop talking nonsense and help instead. They began to pull back the coffin lid. The boy exclaimed that these dolls were approaching them. The girl asked her brother not to think about it. It was just a fantasy, and they would soon find a way out, after which they would disgrace the owner of this adventure house when the time came. Meanwhile, in the observation room, a guy sat with French fries and thought about how ideals are great, but reality may not be as perfect as they imagine. Shawan said it was time to get ready. They were going to open the coffin. The girl exclaimed that she understood him. They began to push the coffin lid harder and harder. It was very difficult for them, but they finally managed to do it. And then there was a loud bang. The dolls' people gathered around the boys. The boy and girl fell to the floor from the loud sound. They were a little scared. A girl appeared from under the coffin lid and flew up. The boy was very tense. The girl soared higher and higher, glaring menacingly at them. Streams of scarlet blood flowed from her eyes. The dead princess looked very creepy. The boy was frightened and froze in place. He started crowing again, distracting the living dead man. He tried to do something, but the only thought on his mind was that he had to run. He ran as fast as he could for the door. His sister begged He-shan not to run, but Shihan ran faster and faster, begging the dead man's girl to leave him alone. Xiaowan laughed heartily. He-shan screamed with all his heart. He abandoned his sister and ran away. The girl realized they had been separated to be broken one by one. She decided it was a great move. The danger was just beginning, but the girl still decided that she had to find her brother He-shan as quickly as possible. The evil laughter grew louder and louder all around. Beads of sweat ran down my sister's face. She started calling her brother and looking for him all over the area. She ran towards the door. The girl opened the door and kept calling him. She was very scared. The girl was more worried about her brother. When she entered the room, someone's funeral was taking place. She couldn't understand what was happening. Candles were burning on the table and everything was dark and eerie. Before her was some kind of bridal chamber. She exclaimed, reassuring herself that she was not afraid. It's all a conspiracy by that boss. Ghosts don't exist. That's how the girl told herself. She won't be scared. The girl closed her eyes, sweat pouring down her face. But she tried to calm herself. The protagonist, looking at the monitor, realized he'd made the beauty cry. That wasn't what he'd really wanted. Oddly enough, the haunted house only has a few rooms. The sister couldn't understand why her brother couldn't hear her when she called him. The girl began calling him louder and louder. She began feeling around. Then I heard someone's footsteps, as if someone had entered the room. The girl asked who or what it was. She became very tense. Something scared her. Apparently it was her reflection that scared her. It turns out it was a mirror. The girl looked at herself again, but saw something different there. Tears kept flowing from her eyes. She didn't understand why. After all, she wasn't seeing herself in the mirror. She was trying to figure it all out. There really was another girl in the mirror. She was watching her from the side. As a senior in forensic medicine, Gao has dissected numerous corpses, and the woman's face in the mirror seems very familiar to her. It was a face that only a man consumed by death could have. There was a real corpse in this house of adventure. The girl fell to the floor again. She braced herself with her hand. But she still didn't lose hope. She began calling out to her brother. When a person is in a very tense state, their physical senses transform to see Xiaowan, and the tension and fear that had previously arisen vanished instantly. At that moment, only words filled Gao's head. The girl exclaimed that everything was wonderful. Fear instantly pierces every part of Gao's body, like a moth to a ray of light in the darkness. The sister started screaming and calling for her brother again. Now she was seriously scared. These screams could be heard in the street. The visitors were also quite frightened. The girl, sitting on the floor, screamed at the woman to stay away. Beads of sweat kept running down her face. The protagonist contacted Xiaowan. Apparently, he wanted to tell her something. The boy asked the girl to finish. He gave the order to get them out of there. Then, Xiaowan leaned over to the girl and asked if she was okay. She explained that the visit was over and asked permission to take them out to rest. The visitors realized it was the beauty who had entered first. Xiaowan led her out, tearful and frightened. The protagonist asked Xiaowan if there hadn't been a boy with her. Xiaowan replied that he said he saw a ghost when he looked in the mirror. He was so frightened that he fainted, and she had to pull him out first. He seemed like a healthy man, but he left his companion alone. The guy fainted again. If Uncle Shu found out, he'd blame him again. The guy was lying on a bench and talking about being a big rooster. Is this adventure house really that scary? People were saying that someone had fainted and needed to call an ambulance. One girl was so scared that she had to be given CPR due to lack of oxygen. People couldn't understand what was happening. One of the men asked why he heard the tourists faint. Uncle Shu was the amusement park manager. He asked why their project was so frightening to people. What if an accident happened? Why couldn't they let him worry about it? The protagonist asked his uncle what he was doing there. He knew the house wasn't scary, and the guest was just too timid. The boy, regaining consciousness, began to lament that there was someone in the mirror. Uncle Shu asked him if he was okay. The protagonist asked what kind of mirror it was and what he saw in it. The boy asked not to be pulled. He exclaimed that there was a ghost in the mirror. It was the mirror in the adventure house, and he became very scared, after which he ran into the room. There was a bronze mirror hanging on the wall in that room, and someone was calling out to him from within it. The protagonist laughed and exclaimed that it could be just heat stroke. Uncle asked why he didn't remember their adventure house having a project involving a mirror. The protagonist laughed and replied that it was probably just an ordinary mirror. But he thought about those words. Who could have scared him so much with an ordinary mirror? Maybe there's something wrong with him. Yesterday's adventure committee was on a nightmare level. Everything around was glowing red. The mirrors were stained with burgundy and scarlet spots. They were quite unusual. The mirror this student spoke of must have something to do with it. It was quite unusual and interesting. A boy from medical school saw something in a bronze mirror. There was someone in the mirror. It looked like the same thing had happened to him. The protagonist began to approach the mirror. He came a little closer. The boy began to peer at him. He had some kind of mask on his face. When the protagonist took off his mask, he saw something and wondered what it was. So it was there from the start. The boy's gaze changed. That night, the mirror tried to pull him inside. There were a lot of red eyes and hands there. It felt like someone was watching him from the mirror. Leaving it like this would only create more problems. That was the moment he was separated from his sister. This guy was so scared that he managed to lose his shoe. The protagonist watched the video recording. At one point, the boy suddenly stopped. He wondered why. It's very strange why he suddenly goes to the mirror. He ran so fast. His reflection in the mirror seemed to be nothing serious. The boy tried to put all the puzzle pieces together, but then he looked closer and noticed something. What could this be? Why did the reflection disappear so quickly? There's definitely something in the mirror, and what the hell is it? The only thing he can do now is to cover all the mirrors in this haunted house. Someone lives inside the mirror. Could another world really exist inside the mirror? It all started with this phone, and this creature appeared. So it makes sense that if he wants to defeat him, he'll need the help of a phone. The rules of this game seem fair enough. If he wants to expand his haunted house even further and deal with the creature inside the mirror, he needs to figure out how to complete these missions. It seems he's seen this before. A new adventure is unlocked. The boy discovered it yesterday. And now a new task has appeared. A new adventure. A murder at midnight. A dangerous psychopath roamed the ruined house. A modernized scene. They weren't husband and wife in life, but in death they were buried in the same grave. Come what may, the protagonist decided. The haunted house finally began to get back on its feet. He can't resist the opportunity to make it even better, so he'll use a variety of methods. The boy pressed the button to continue taking risks. He asked if there was any risk on his part. A lottery wheel appeared before him. He wondered if they had cash. The wheel was activated after collecting the first scream from a visitor. 100 screams in one try is truly terrifying. The conditions for its activation are already so complex, but the result is still random. If the result is an ominous ghost, wouldn't that be a complete loss? The boy laughed and exclaimed that this was only if there was an evil ghost there. His phone rang, congratulating the boy on winning a rare, special item. The damned love letter. The chances of receiving such a letter are 3 in 1,000. It's simply incredible. The protagonist even shed a tear as he was so lucky to have won such a valuable prize. Her eyes were open, her cheeks as white as ash. As soon as she fell out the window, she became taboo at school. In her red dancing shoes and blood-stained uniform, even her name became something only uttered in hysterics. People pretended she didn't exist. But after that day, someone started receiving her love letters again. The boy was surprised by such luck. Love letters, and a 3 in 1,000 chance too. Even before he resolved the issue with the creature in the mirror, he was gifted with another one. He doesn't even know whether he's lucky or unlucky. The protagonist held a love letter in his hands. He was very surprised. The boy began to open the letter. There was probably some kind of inscription there. When he unfolded the paper, it said that she liked him and had a heart drawn on it. The guy started wondering what kind of person she liked him for. He crumpled up the letter and asked her to take it back. Then Shawan appeared at the door. She asked the boss what he was doing there. The boy replied that he was doing nothing. He wanted to tell her something. All the mirrors in the house were covered, even those related to the quest. During his speech, he asked the girl to try to stay away from mirrors. She replied that she understood, and she asked if he had arrived yet. The protagonist began to say goodbye to the girl. Shawan couldn't understand why her boss had 2 shadows. It was very strange. Visitors were warned that their park was closing. They were asked to remember their personal belongings and thanked for doing so. A young man asked a girl about Ping'an apartments. He said he hadn't heard of any and asked if she knew. She replied that she didn't know either. An old man sitting on a bench told the boys that this was a very bad place and that if he were them, he wouldn't go there. They had to go straight ahead, otherwise he'd run into it. He lost because of him. What bad luck. The boy wondered what he meant about the bad place. It's strange, but there's nothing around here. Why was this old man here? How tired he was of walking already. There's emptiness all around. How can anyone even live here? The boy was overjoyed, having found the cursed house. The challenge mission should be harder than the daily missions. He'll have to be more careful today. It's 1850, and the mission requires him to be there by 10:30. That means he still has time to take a quick look around. When the boy opened the door, he hoped there was someone else there. He noticed a piece of paper with writing on the wall. It said Zhang Qing and a photo of a girl. A woman of 27, 157 centimeters tall, thin. She likes to wear red. Anyone with information was asked to contact Mr. Wang. A monetary reward will be provided. The protagonist decided this was very strange and what was going on here. A man approached him and asked what he was doing there. The man looked very strange. The boy said hello and asked if he was the owner. He wanted to know how much it would cost him to spend the night there. The man asked for identification. Regarding payment, he said they would discuss it on the second floor, after which the man led the boy away. The protagonist followed him. Judging by the peeling paint, he believes this place is at least 20 or 30 years old. However, this place isn't as terrible as he thought. The place is clean, there's no trash, and even the lawn is carefully mown. It looked like no one lived on the first floor. They continued walking forward. The protagonist noticed that there were people on the second floor too. This was clear from the footsteps. The boy continued to follow the man. Meanwhile, someone opened the door slightly and watched them. A girl's red eye appeared through one of the cracks. It was an unpleasant sight. The boy felt a little creepy. What was really going on here? The man asked one of the customers why he was there again and ran after some guy. He exclaimed that he had told him many times that his girlfriend wasn't there. If he persisted, he would have to call the police. The man scattered his papers and exclaimed that he was speaking to him. Some papers started flying around the corridor. The protagonist noticed a leaflet. It was the flyer that was hanging on the wall when he arrived. It had a girl on it and information about her. Did she really live here before? But why look for someone only in this building? It seems he comes here very often. The protagonist picked up the leaflet and handed it to the guy. The man asked him to ignore him. He told the boy that the man was crazy. The boy took the leaflet and thanked the protagonist. His name was Wang Qi. The boy looked him in the eye and replied that there was nothing to be thanked for. The system returned the details. He was holding scissors and a hammer, and was simply wandering outside his apartment. The culprit of the murder had to be found and survived until dawn. The boy thought that perhaps this guy was the man. The man asked him to get out of there and never see him again. He told the protagonist that one night would cost him 50 yuan. He handed him the keys and said he could choose any apartment on the floor. But why should he stay on the second floor? Or apartments on the first or third floors are unavailable. The man replied that he had too many questions. The apartment was simply in poor condition. The protagonist thought that in a typical residential building where apartments are rented out, the reception desk is usually located at the front door. But in this place, the reception desk is not only on the second floor, but also at the very end of the corridor. Regardless, he needs to leave his bags first. A hole like that isn't worth 50,000 yuan. Then there was a sound. Someone coughed. The old man was told to keep his mouth shut. The protagonist realized that the voice was most likely the owner's. Could there really be someone else living with him? The boy paused and began to listen, but the sound suddenly stopped. A hand appeared from somewhere. The protagonist froze in place. A hand was placed on his shoulder. It was the madman. He advised the young man to leave while he could. Don't try to spend the night here. The boy asked why, since he lived here too. The guy replied that everyone here knew that murders had taken place in this building in the past. The protagonist asked the guy if there had been a murder there. The guy replied that yes. The boy decided that he looked like an NPC in the game who gives him an additional task. Then why didn't he leave? Why didn't he stay here? The protagonist decided to get to the bottom of the truth. The guy replied that his fiancée rented an apartment here and then disappeared without a trace. After she went missing, he immediately called the police, and the police officer said that her phone signal was coming from that house. But the police said she wasn't there. But he's sure she's still here. The guy showed his fiancée on the flyer. Something must have happened to her and she's in danger now. He explained that his wife had been kidnapped by people who lived here. I asked him where he got that from. Then the guy asked him to look. It was she who sent him a message. The messages said, "Save me," a bunch of times. The guy, holding the phone to his ear, exclaimed that he would definitely find her. He swore to the girl. Why can't she pick up the phone? He kept insisting that he would definitely find her. The protagonist remarked that he loved his fiancée very much, but he never asked him if he'd seen her. This man is certainly an intriguing character, but he finds it difficult to say whether he's crazy or not. Someone exclaimed about fresh blood. It was a girl. She told the protagonist not to believe him. The boy turned in her direction. It was some girl who spoke as she unexpectedly opened the door. He immediately jumped away from her. The protagonist thought it was a ghost, but the girl laughed and said she was just an ordinary person. She's been here for 9 months now, but she hasn't seen even a trace of ghosts. There are no ghosts in this world. The protagonist exclaimed that she was clearly one of those people. What an outfit! The girl replied that it was already late and he had better return to his apartment. She decided to tell him one last thing. She asked him not to go up to the 3rd floor. The protagonist was very surprised. So many people had told him about the 3rd floor. He thought it was worth checking out. The boy decided to first return to his room and get ready. He headed towards the door. It's a haunted place. He decided to see what would happen next. The protagonist looked at his phone and saw the messages of the guy who got scared during the quest. It was He Sheng, the one who'd been on his quest that day. He reminded him that he was currently in a haunted house, so he should turn on the live stream. If an accident occurs, viewers will be able to call the police. Viewers have already watched and asked if this is real. The live stream video could serve as compelling evidence, and he could watch the adventure later. The boy decided it was a good idea. It could also boost the adventure house's popularity. He asked him to remember to call the police if anything happened. He was in Ping An's apartment. He Sheng told him not to worry, as he would call the police immediately. The protagonist considered himself a genius. He greeted his friends and exclaimed that a live adventure was about to begin. Tonight, they would spend the night in a haunted house. He started reading the messages. Viewers were already giving him a ton of likes and were terrified. But for now, they were just joking. The protagonist shouted for them to grab their amulets and talismans. He warned the audience that they were about to begin. The boy picked up the physical bull amulet. If he cannot guarantee his safety in the house, he can make a small trap on the door to prevent strangers from entering the house. You had to take a string and tape it to the door. If someone entered the room, the string would break and they would know about it. The audience called him a moron and thought it wouldn't save him. They'd rather punch him for it. It's located in the Ping An apartments. Some people probably don't even know about this place. This house is located far from the road, and it is full of ghosts. It is somewhere in the mountains. The boy spent a lot of money and effort to get here. Thanks to the Citers for sending 10 ghostly souls. The house really does look creepy. Someone wrote that their mother told them stories about this terrifying place. The boy laughed and remarked that the number of viewers had exceeded 5,000. He would become famous. He looked up information about the house online. 5 years ago, a family of 4 perished in a fire in this building. At the time, the 1st and 3rd floors were rented out, and everyone managed to escape during the fire except the family living on the 3rd floor. A police investigation proved that the family had been burned to death. But that's not all. When he got here, he discovered even stranger things happening here. The boy suddenly stopped. He couldn't tell if it was the guy or the owner behind the door. The protagonist became wary. The door creaked unexpectedly. Most of the 1st and 2nd floors were restored, but most interestingly, the 3rd floor was left in the same condition as 4 years ago. These people are hopeless. It looks like he'll have to look for other clues before he can come to any conclusion. The protagonist told his dear friends that the landlord had warned them that the 3rd floor was a restricted area. It was dark, and he didn't know if they would be able to see anything. All the walls are charred, and the air is filled with a burning smell that can be easily felt. The windows were boarded up. This had nothing in common with his adventure house. The boy continued walking. He couldn't stand these haters anymore. He decided to continue their investigation. He stumbled upon a startling discovery. Every resident of the building was somehow connected to him, and he suspected that the killer had been hiding among them for years. A strange old man who was playing checkers on a bench showed him the way to this house. And the guy who rented him the room was a man with strange legs, about 40 years old. He is the first suspect. The protagonist wrote to his friends to share their thoughts on the matter. They decided the place was still in the same condition as 4 years ago, and that it was disgusting. The old man may be incapacitated now, but that doesn't mean he was the same 4 years ago. The protagonist laughed and said they'd figure it all out for him now. Many years have passed. Even if there was evidence, it would not have survived for so long. Here the boy stopped. He heard a sound nearby. What the hell is this? Some kind of doll appeared next to him and grabbed his leg. What is this doll doing here? A haunted house and a child? That's the perfect combo. Perhaps this doll belongs to the daughter of the house's former owner. It was the 3rd floor that burned down. The boy couldn't understand how the doll had survived. He became even more curious. After all, there had been a major fire in this house. He picked up the doll and thought that he liked it. If she told him to take it with him, then he would. After all, this doll is very cute. Then the protagonist heard a sound again. Those were footsteps. Someone was definitely coming this way. The man was telling the girl that they had to get this thing out of the way soon. They couldn't put it off any longer. The new tenant was already heading up to the third floor. The girl remarked that it was a good thing she'd stopped him in time so he didn't suspect anything. The man was upset and surprised. He exclaimed that this was very bad. They asked the old man if everything was okay. The man asked the girl to tell everyone to be ready. Today they would dig him up and bury him in the hills. The protagonist became curious about what they were planning to dig. He began following the pair. The boy texted the guys that there would be some interesting content coming soon. He watched the girl leave. She asked if they really had to do this. They were already standing near the grave. The man said that if they dug it up, their fingerprints would be on it, and it would be incredibly difficult to explain. He thinks they should call the police. The man tried to reach out to the other man, but the other man grabbed him and asked if he really thought it would be easy to explain anything now. Or maybe he's just itching to die. If they involve the police, they'll be the prime suspects. His escape from the scene of the car accident and the theft of the old man's property will be easily exposed. None of them had a clear conscience, and it was difficult for them to find a comfortable lair. If any of them dared to do anything, they had better be careful. The girl asked them to calm down. Since they are all in the same boat, instead of arguing with each other, it is better for them to act together. The man asked the second man to stop complaining and get to work. The second man was indignant and asked why he had to act first. But they asked him to hurry and do it immediately. He began to pull off some kind of white veil. The man told him to dig her up and get out of there as quickly as possible. The girl's body was found in the wall. The protagonist saw that it was hidden inside the wall and that it was what they were about to dig up. The sight was quite eerie. The dead girl was wedged into the wall. Apparently she had been murdered and walled up there. The protagonist asked to call the police quickly, but they wrote to him and told him who he was. The boy was angry with Shan. He promised to show him who he was the next time he came to the adventure house. Spectators asked him to turn on the flashlight. They couldn't see anything going on there. The body was hidden inside the wall, and that's what they're trying to dig out. Meanwhile, the man urged the other man to push a little harder. He was pestering the second man with his commands. He was already working, and here he was standing. The girl agreed with him and said they had shoved her into the wall so the police wouldn't find anything. The man exclaimed that she was about to fall out of the wall and asked him to grab her hand. He felt very scared and uncomfortable. The protagonist thought it was no surprise that he'd said not to go up to the third floor. It was good that he could communicate that. The man asked the fat man to walk faster. He replied that he was already walking fast. The protagonist said that these thugs had obviously killed their old owner of the house and hidden his body somewhere here, or they're carrying this body to the body of the house's owner. Suddenly the phone flew out of the boy's hands. Someone was calling him. He said they'd seen his video, and it had great potential. They were interested in whether he'd be interested in collaborating with them. They could contact the top streamers on their platform to promote it and increase his popularity. Doing this alone is very difficult, so most online streamers rely on teams and collaboration. This is a very good suggestion, and what does he think about it? The boy finally picked up the phone and exclaimed that he wasn't interested. Of course, he attracted the others' attention. The guys wondered what kind of guy he was. They all turned their heads in his direction. The protagonist decided he was screwed now. Beads of sweat trickled down his hands as he considered what to do next in this situation. The fat man asked who he was. The man gave him an angry look. The protagonist laughed and asked the boys if they couldn't sleep either. His smile was quite frightened. Then something sharp flew towards him. It flew at incredible speed. It was a sharp-bladed weapon that was stuck into the wall next to the boy's head. It was very close to the protagonist's head. He was just lucky. The man exclaimed that they mustn't let him escape. They took up arms and begged the boy to come to them. The chase for the protagonist began. He told them they didn't have to believe him, but he'd just gone out to pee. The guys shouted at him that he wouldn't escape from them. The protagonist asked him to leave him alone. They were wailing that they mustn't let him go. He must have seen them moving the body. The boy decided the difficulty of this testing mission was too high. Should he hide here in the forest until dawn? The protagonist managed to escape into the forest and hide among the trees and bushes. He parted a bush slightly and looked ahead. There was a house in front of him. Most likely it was a rest home for forest rangers. He approached the door and tried to open it. The protagonist decided to wait here until Shan called the police. The boy pushed the door open with his hand. He asked if anyone was there and then began to go inside. He noticed clothes on the sofa and dirt stuck to them. This dirt had not yet dried, indicating that they had been worn recently. These clothes probably belonged to the woman immured in the wall. He picked up one of the girl's clothes. Suddenly a phone rang, but it definitely wasn't his. The protagonist turned his head to the side, searching for his phone. He came closer. Then he reached for the phone. The messages read, "Save me," multiple times. She sends a message every night. It's always just 2 words, "Save me." Could this really be Wang Chi's fiance's phone number? The man who sent Wang Chi letters every night is his wife's killer. He appears quite frequently in the immediate vicinity of Ping An's apartment, which means his actual residence must be very close to the apartment. In that case, this wooden house must probably be Wang Chi's house. The unfortunate man who wanders every day in search of his missing bride is probably the real killer. While the protagonist was thinking about this, looking at his phone, someone appeared at the door. It was a man holding an axe. He told the boy that he was sorry he had seen all of this. Behind him was Wang Chi. He immediately said that his fiancée was somewhere in this house. He didn't lie to him at all, did he? The protagonist exclaimed that it was most likely he who killed her. He killed his fiancée. But the guy replied that he hadn't done anything wrong. He was right, though, and it was he who had walled her up. Wang Chi began to remember how he took her body and hid it in the wall. She was already dead. The protagonist asked him why he did it. He looked into his eyes, waiting for an answer. Wang Chi replied that it was all her fault and that she had made a mistake. She wanted to leave him. So what could he do to keep her? She was perfect, like a beautiful flower. Everyone wanted to be with her, but she was his fiancée. He was pathetic in comparison to her, a mere non-entity. The boy loved her very much and couldn't do anything about it, but he didn't want anyone else to have her. Even though she was his, he was still worried. She wanted to leave him, to abandon him. The guy said that was exactly why he did it. He made sure she was always with him. She was there and only him, because he loves her. The protagonist realized he was nuts and there was no point in arguing with him. He had to attack first to stand a chance. Wang Chi exclaimed that he didn't mean to do that. Does the boy understand? He began to complain again that he didn't want to do this. The boy headed toward the protagonist. But the boy sent him packing and struck him in the face with all his might with his hammer. Streams of scarlet blood spurted from his mouth. The guy started asking why he hit him. He's a good man after all. The protagonist picked up the hammer and replied that it might be good, but Wang Chi had long since become rotten. Then he brought the hammer down on his head. The guy was left lying on the floor. The protagonist called him a psycho and went outside. Wang Chi was left lying there bleeding. Meanwhile, it was night outside. Police cars were already speeding down the road. The officer shone a flashlight and asked who had called the police. There were 2 people. The protagonist replied that it was him. He found the body on the 3rd floor and was able to catch the killer. And here in front of us was a huge police station. Many people were on the street. The boy knocked on the door. He was asked to come in. The officer introduced himself to Chen. He explained that he was Captain Lee and was handling his case. Chen Gay asked the captain if he had caught the man. The man replied that the police had not been idle. Not only Wang Chi had been caught, but also other residents of the house, some of whom were wanted. They rescued the owner of the house and the body he'd spoken of. The protagonist was overjoyed. It was great. The captain said the fake landlord, Zhang Peng, had escaped. He was the most bloodthirsty and evil of them all, with a lot of blood on his hands. He was afraid that Zhang Peng would return to him for revenge. The captain warned the boy that he must be very careful. The man would clearly seek revenge on him. Chen Gu told the captain not to worry. He must have had some kind of plan. The boy exclaimed that if he decided to attack him, he would personally give him a break, after which he would drag him to the police station. Before us is a small, neat house. It's morning, 8 o'clock, 9 minutes past. This is the room of the protagonist, Chen Gay. The guy was thinking about how he was almost killed last night. The captain said that this Dadan could come back for him, so he slept without even taking off his clothes. I wonder what reward he received for this mission. The Midnight Assassination Challenge mission was successfully completed. A new scenario was unlocked. Chen Gay realized he'd completed the mission quite well. Then he noticed something. The system congratulated him on discovering the hidden element of this mission. A missing person's notice from Wang Chi. He'd already sealed it away in the wall, but it seemed she'd found her way into his heart. Isn't that why Wang Chi rushed off to find his bride? The world of madmen is too complex to understand. A missing person's notice from Wang Chi. The boy thought his phone was broken. It felt more like a curse than a reward. While the boy was standing with the phone, someone suddenly entered his room. The girl called for the boss. It was Xiao Wan. He asked her what had happened. The girl exclaimed that he was on TV. She was very excited. Chen Gu immediately turned his head in her direction. The boy turned on the news channel. It was breaking news. They said justice always prevails, and yesterday the police arrested a group of criminals. 4 years ago, a fire occurred in an apartment, killing a family of 4. Thanks to the help of a kind citizen, law enforcement agencies were able to apprehend the real criminal, who will now answer for his crimes. Since one of the criminals is still on the run, the good citizen's identity cannot be revealed temporarily to ensure his safety. Xiaowan asked her boss if he was the man. She said it was the first time someone she knew in real life had appeared on television. The main character replied that it was him, and she could now worship him. The boy picked up the phone, having received a signal. A murder at midnight, the scene set up. This scenario is complete. The system asked him to remember to go up to the 3rd floor to take a look. He wondered when the scenario was created and whether he could move them. The boy found himself on the 3rd floor of a haunted house. Why did it look so much like Ping An's apartment? The entire 3rd floor was so clean, it seemed like they'd skimped on renovations. The place felt alive, permeated with anxiety and pain. There are over 10 traps, and many rooms are connected via hidden passages. He'll earn a lot of money. There are also some nasty hidden gems. Chen Go told Xiaowan that the equipment had been updated. A new stage had been added, and customers would be setting it up tomorrow. The girl immediately started jumping and screaming that it was really cool. She was happy. People began lining up for tickets. The protagonist noticed that the number of guests was growing, and the ratings had also increased significantly. If this continues, he'll be able to expand the adventure house in a few days. Many people wanted to visit the haunted house. The system reported that he had completed a normal mission. The boy received his mission reward, namely, the Skull Crusher doctor's uniform. A bloody robe lay before him. Skull Crusher uniform. Clark worked in a psychiatric hospital for over 20 years. Constant interaction with mentally ill patients slowly warped his outlook on life. One day, he decided to end it all once and for all. He believed the source of his patients' madness was rooted in their brains, so the only solution was to split their skulls. The timing is just perfect. If the protagonist can combine it with the midnight murder scenario, if he does that, it'll be a great combo. Chen Ge pressed his finger on the bloody cloak in his inventory. The boy's phone rang. It was He Sheng. He said yesterday had been very interesting. Chen Ge thanked him for calling the police. Thanks to him, nothing happened. The boy invited him over when he had time. He Sheng asked if that beautiful Gaozhou was with him. Chen Ge replied no, that was a minor issue. The seniors in the department formed a team to avenge Gaozhou's sister. The boy said he couldn't talk anymore and hung up. He hadn't expected this child to be so interesting. The main character was walking along the road when suddenly someone's hand reached out to his shoulder. Some guy put his hand on him and told the boss he needed 3 tickets. A lot of people surrounded him. One of them said he'd heard his haunted house was pretty good. If he couldn't scare them, they'd ask for their money back. Chen Go realized that these were the ones who would help him experience a new scene. He decided to see if they could laugh afterwards. And so the boy greeted everyone, exclaiming that his haunted house would satisfy them. Chen Ge put a mask on his face and wished everyone a good time. He was quite serious and smiled a little creepily. When one of the boys opened the door, he was very scared, but curiosity prevailed. The boys looked in fear at what was behind the door, beads of sweat running down their faces. They found themselves in a huge, long corridor. What kind of corridor could this be? Could it be a wedding scene? That's probably a different scenario. Why aren't they doing the wedding scene? The second guy replied that he didn't know, but it was definitely a new scene. The fat guy said it didn't matter whether it was new or not. He wasn't afraid of anything. The script was called Murder at Midnight. The protagonist asked not to take any photos, otherwise those who violated the script would be held personally responsible for any consequences. The exit is hidden within the scenario, and the game lasts 20 minutes. To surrender, simply walk to the cell and scream for help. The kids were asked to enjoy the script. One of them laughed and said he was absolutely pissed. This decrepit place would soon be destroyed. It's time to try out the props Chen Ge received for completing the mission. He thinks they'll really like them. After all, he wants to enjoy himself too. Chen Ge was dressed in the costume of Dr. Skullcrusher. He laughed and exclaimed that the hammer was really heavy. The boy decided to start the game. The boys were already worried. They perked up and heard a sound. They looked at the monitor screen. A video camera was attached to the wall above. You could see these 3 guys who had been very self-confident until now, but now they were already scared. The protagonist coughed, then laughed evilly. He was wearing a creepy, scary mask. The boys got scared and started running away. They asked who that man was running after them, carrying a hammer. They started running as fast as they could. The boy was holding a terrifying, bloody, skull-shaped hammer. He asked the boys if they were afraid and why they were running away. The boy told the boss that they were being haunted by a ghost doll, so there was a real ghost in their house. The boys were screaming that they were very scared. The boy started removing his mask and lowered his head. There was a doll lying on the floor. the one the protagonist had picked up in the previous scenario. The kids were pointing at it. Chenggu realized it was the doll he'd found in Ping An's apartment. It seemed to be waving at him. The boy was very surprised. He wondered what she was doing here. Suddenly, his phone beeped. The system began congratulating the protagonist. The ghost's favorite, the system congratulated on the launch of the only hidden mission in the murder scenario at midnight. The spirits still had unfinished business in the mortal world. It was necessary to help them fulfill their desires, and they would become useful allies. The boy asked the doll its name. This doll must have some grudges in Ping An's apartment. If the arsonist Zhang Peng is brought to justice and punished as he deserves, then his wish should be fulfilled. The boy asked the boss when he said this. The doll's eyes seemed to glow. Xiao Xiao's ghost doll, a slightly positive impression. The system reported that he had attracted her attention and seemed to move slightly closer to her. Another page opened. It was the scarlet ghost of Zhang Ya. She was different from her. She liked him, but she liked him dead even more. The protagonist thought that if he remembered correctly, it was she who had sent him a love letter. He received a notification. The greater the attachment, the more orders they would carry out. It turns out these ghosts might be on his team. Chen Gei told Xiao Xiao that this was now her new home. He asked her to be careful that he didn't step on her. The guy said it seems their boss is sick. He's talking to a doll right now and it's creepy. He told the boss that 2 more people had come with him, and he wondered what had happened to them. Chen Gei asked him to tell him why they had gotten separated and where it had happened. Someone was shouting at him to get out. The protagonist became wary and asked what was going on. The boy replied that it was Brother Luo's voice. Chen Gei thought it was very strange. Why did this guy climb into the attic? Taking his bloody hammer, he said he'd go and have a look. The boy asked the boss to wait and not leave him here alone. The protagonist began to move higher and higher into the attic. The voice kept asking him not to come near it. The boy asked the boss why Brother Luo was acting like that. He kept shouting that he would kill him if he came near him. He then exclaimed that he wasn't afraid. When the guys entered the room, the guy was sitting on the floor with a chair in his hands. Beads of sweat were running down his face. He had broken the glass with that very wooden chair. Chenja asked him what had happened. Had he encountered anything strange? The boy replied that there was something in the mirror. It wanted to enter his body, after which it wanted to take his soul. The protagonist immediately approached the mirror and cast a curious glance at it. His face was reflected in the broken mirror. But so far I didn't see anything strange about it. The boy told his boss that Brother Lo had caused him trouble. The protagonist replied that there was no need to pay for the mirror and that the game was over. He started leading them outside. The boys grabbed Brother Lo and asked if he could go. But the boy continued to whine about the mirror, saying something was clearly wrong with it. The system congratulated the boy. The current state awaits expansion. Each expansion will bring him a mysterious reward. And after 3 expansions, the haunted house will be upgraded to a horror maze. Chen Gei asked if he could get the expansion already. I wonder how much it would cost. But first, he has to deal with that inexplicable situation in the mirror. He seems to be somehow becoming attached to people. If nothing was done about this, it would have a negative impact on his business. The boy began to think about the best course of action. He went outside and saw Captain Li standing near the building. The protagonist asked him what he was doing there. The captain replied that he was looking for him. Zhang Peng might have infiltrated the amusement park. It seems he's looking for an opportunity to take revenge, and they're now trying to find him. The captain explained that Chen Gei was in a dangerous situation and advised him to hide somewhere. The boy replied that if he dared to enter his ghost house, he would not be able to return. Pan's sudden appearance isn't such a bad thing for him. He can use it to take away the monster in the mirror, or the monster will kill him, which is to his advantage anyway. The captain warned the protagonist of the danger and began to return to his police car. Chen Gei watched him go. Xiao Wan asked her boss what the police wanted from him. The protagonist didn't explain, but instead asked the girl to close the haunted house for the day. He said she could go home immediately. There would be guests that evening, and he needed to get ready. The girl wondered who this guest was, that the boss needed to greet him personally. She was very interested. Meanwhile, midnight struck. The protagonist was in the video surveillance room, sitting on a chair in his bloody robe. On the camera, he saw a man approaching the house. He was holding a huge, sharp knife. Chen Gei was glad that he had finally arrived. He informed Captain Li that Peng had arrived. He would play with him first, so he asked the captain not to rush. After careful preparation, Zhang Peng's route was mapped out. The remaining rooms in the house were locked. Zhang Peng approached the desired room step by step. He had to see with his own eyes how the monster from the mirror entered this man's body. Chen Gei was looking forward to it. The boy laughed a sarcastic laugh. after which he decided that he was a bad guy after all. Pan couldn't understand why the doors to this house were locked. He figured that after he killed him, this would be a good place to hide the body. He thinks they'll only find him in 10 days. He destroyed their hideout in Ping An's apartment and sent Huan Er to prison. The man was extremely angry at the protagonist. He peered into the darkness and began shouting that he would kill Chen Gei. His eyes were very angry and full of hatred. He kept moaning that he would kill him. The man approached the boy and, drawing a knife, began to attack him. But he stabbed the knife into nothing. His eyes were bloodshot. The man couldn't understand how the boy could have disappeared. Pan began to look around, trying to figure out where the guy had disappeared to. The protagonist was behind him. The man began frantically thinking about where he could have gone. How can a person just vanish into thin air? Beads of sweat ran down his face. Chen Ge was already outside the door, hammer at the ready. Peng assumed he was a ghost. Meanwhile, the hammer flew toward the man. The protagonist raised it over Pan's head. He exclaimed that the man had guessed wrong, and he raised the hammer as high as he could to make the blow more powerful. Chen Ge admitted that his suit really didn't look human. He apologized and said he wouldn't hit him on the head again. The man was already lying on the floor, wondering why this guy was so cruel. He was even worse than him. Just a crazy killer. Chen Ge said that he was so brave to come to his haunted house alone. He continued to stand in the room with the bloody hammer on his back. Peng asked him not to come closer and called him crazy. The protagonist asked him not to be afraid and said he wouldn't hurt him. He promised not to miss this time, so he asked him to remain still and not move. The man exclaimed that the moment they met, he broke his arm. Why does he then say he won't hurt him? The protagonist laughed maliciously. The man climbed into another room and decided the boy had set up an ambush. He didn't want to leave so quickly. Chen Ge laughed again. After all, there was a real ghost in this room. Pan was already standing in the middle of the room in front of a huge mirror. He saw something in it. What the hell could this be? The man realized it was some kind of ghost. He began screaming in terror. Pan fell to the floor and begged the protagonist for help, but the mirror began to pull him in. The man screamed that he didn't want to die. Then someone asked the boy if he was injured. Chen Ge was already standing outside the door. The police approached him. The guys were asking where Zhang Peng was. They had their guns drawn. The protagonist told Captain Lee that he was inside the room. He warned the police that the man was escaping. Pan found a small window and squeezed himself through it. He was actually trying to escape. Without lowering his weapon, the captain told the protagonist that he could leave the rest to them. The boy immediately agreed. Whatever happened, Zhang Peng was no longer the same. The man ran down the road, shrouded in some kind of dark, gloomy haze. Chen Ge returned to the room from which Peng had escaped. He noticed that the ghost from the mirror had left with Zhang Peng. The number 2 was written on the mirror. Perhaps the ghost left this mark. Could the number be connected to his life? He believes that now he just has to wait. Xiao Xiao's puppet ghost, the only ghost who listens to him, knows only how to be sweet. In a real combat situation, he'd probably have to protect her. He looked at the photo on his phone. Accepting Zhang Ya's favor was a dangerous task. Now the only thing that can help him is the mission of the bloody heart of the scarlet ghost Zhang Ya. She must be a very strong ghost. She had to be stronger than the ghost in the mirror. The boy decided that if he could subdue her and she would protect him, he would definitely be safe. The protagonist, after the system asked if he was sure he was accepting Zhang Ya's task, pressed the confirm button. And then a signal came on his phone. Some red bloody shoes appeared in front of him. The boy asked what kind of red shoes these were. Andersen's Fairy Tales, Volume 1, has red dancing shoes. Once upon a time, there was a pair of red shoes that could make a dancer light and able to dance perfectly. None of the dancers dared to wear them because they were a pair of magic shoes that made the dancer keep dancing until they died of exhaustion. You must arrive at the West Jujiang Private Academy within an hour and find Zhang Ya's red dancing shoes before dawn. You can't be late for the first date, otherwise she will be very offended. The protagonist was surprised why his first date with a girl would be in an abandoned school after midnight. Was he really that unlucky in love? It was late evening in the suburbs. A young man hailed a taxi and asked to be taken to a private academy in West Jujiang. When he won the love letter, it described her as wearing a bloody school uniform and red dancing shoes at the moment of her death. Could the fairy tale be true? It seems the key to today's mission is a pair of red dancing shoes. The driver decided to ask the young man a question and asked permission. Why did he go to the West Jujiang Private Academy so late at night? The place is mostly abandoned and far from residential areas. The protagonist replied that he was going on a date. The driver asked who dressed like that on a date. Even guys should know how to dress for a date these days. Chen Ge replied that he didn't know how to explain it. The girl was a bit hard to please and had some strange quirks. The driver told the protagonist they had arrived and wished him luck and a successful date. He received a message telling him to call the police, as if he was being held hostage. As the driver drove away, he reassured himself, saying it was just a date and everything was fine. Chen-ge was surprised he'd left so quickly. How could he trust ordinary people? He'd better get acquainted with the school's layout first. The boy walked forward. He can't believe he's already here. He was at a private academy in western Zhejiang. He managed to reach the destination on time. Now his mission is to find Zhang Ya's red shoes. The most likely places he'd find the red dancing shoes are the women's locker room, which is located in the dance studio, or Zhang Ya's former bedroom. He needed to focus on these two places. The boy began to open the door and found himself in the hallway. There was an ordinary chair in the middle of the hallway. Was there any special significance here? Perhaps someone was already waiting for him. There's no point in getting worked up for no reason. After all, Zhang Ya, the red ghost, is a terrifying presence in this school. He had her love letter, so he asked who would dare challenge him. Suddenly, the chair moved. The protagonist couldn't comprehend what had just happened. He clutched his bloody hammer in his hands and began to reassure himself that everything was fine. Today's main goal is to find that pair of red dancing shoes. As long as these strange things don't bother him in any way, he has no reason to interact with them. The protagonist decided to explore other places first. He read the sign, "Do not enter," and he wondered why it was closed. He didn't have time to look for another way out. Chen-gi raised his hammer as high as he could and struck the wood, shattering the planks into tiny splinters. The boy finally broke down the door. He began to peer inside. It was dark and very difficult to see. He asked if anyone was there. There were only shadows around. He began to enter the room and saw statues in front of him. The boy thought that these were just statues, and there was nothing to be afraid of. But he found this studio rather creepy. It couldn't compare to his haunted house. There was a sign above the door, "Dance class." This was a very good omen. The protagonist thought it was a stroke of luck that he'd found this place so quickly. He hoped he could find dancing shoes here. Chen-ge opened the door slightly and peered inside. Before him was an empty room, and in the middle of it stood 3 chairs. He asked why there were already 3 chairs here. Someone's name is still visible on this one. It was inscribed Chen Yu Jiao. It was clearly a girl's name. He hoped he wouldn't run into her again. Someone laughed maliciously and said hello to him. There was a girl's light shadow around the chairs. She flew up and touched the chairs. The protagonist was confident and held his hammer firmly. He asked not to think he was afraid. It's easiest to find these shoes in dance class. If he doesn't move forward, then he's just a coward. There were lots of photos and diplomas on the wall. The boy decided to see if there were any clues. There were 5 girls in the photo in front of him, but why was one of them blurred out? 4 girls, 4 chairs. If each of them represents a girl, then what really happened to them? So the girl they sketched might be the one. It's definitely Zhang Ya. Suddenly, one of the chairs creaked. It wobbled and began to fly upward. The boy was already heading for the exit, but the chair continued to make noise. He asked if they really thought he didn't have the courage to break them into pieces, and headed back toward the chairs. Still holding his hammer, he approached them. Chen-ge said that nothing could stop him now. He came closer and closer. The chair continued to move, sliding back and forth across the floor. The ghosts were sitting on chairs. Several girls were sitting on them, asking them not to do this. One of them started screaming and saying she was in pain. Streams of blood were streaming from her eyes. She seemed to be tied to a chair and wrapped in barbed wire, her arms and legs wrapped around it. Chen-jo couldn't understand why the ghost was making such a fuss. He moved even closer, hammer in hand. He wondered if it was because of what he had just said to Zhang Ya. If so, it was not good. They seemed to be very sensitive to this name. The chairs kept shifting back and forth. The protagonist stood before them. He asked why they dared to stand in his way. The boy laughed and asked if they thought he was really afraid of them. Suddenly, ghostly hands reached out to the boy. The girls began to approach him. The protagonist noticed that the passage was blocked by a chair. He had no way out. The hammer fell from his hands. The bloody hammer seemed to be looking at him from the side. He didn't understand what these girls were doing. Chen-ge felt as if he saw his soul before him. They gathered around him. The boy felt very ill. He started calling that girl Zhang Ya. It was as if his stomach had turned inside out. The boy stood on his feet, swaying slightly. It felt as if multiple shards of mirror had been stuck into him. The fragments fell to the floor. The boy began to cough. There were a few drops of his blood around. He sat down a little and started coughing again. The protagonist felt very ill. He kept coughing. The boy's eyes began to change color. It was as if blood vessels had burst in his eyes. He couldn't understand what was going on. But he understood only one thing. They were very scared. Approaching the mirror, he grabbed it with one hand. What was happening behind him? The protagonist looked ahead. He continued to cough convulsively. One of the girls appeared behind him. She put her arm around his shoulders, and he extended his hand forward. The boy realized he was in a mirror. Next to him was a girl named Zhang Ya. He felt the ghost lean against his back. Goosebumps ran down his spine. The image in the mirror changed. Aren't these the girls who were trapped inside the chairs? But now they looked like people. They were having fun and talking to each other. They were smiling as they ran around the room. Could Zhang Ya really be behind them? The girls were talking about eating ice cream. One of them exclaimed that she loved sweets the most. The other said she hated them. Chenge realized that Zhang wanted to show him what really happened. The dancing girl was alone and beautiful. They continued their business. Zhang Ya tried to make friends with the other girls. She offered them candy, but they refused and decided to leave. For some reason, they didn't accept her and avoided her. She stood there with a sad face, clutching her fist with candy. A letter fell out of the girl's bag. It landed right on the floor somewhere off to the side. Someone picked up this letter from the floor. What was written in it? The girls suddenly started arguing. Why did they suddenly quarrel? A man entered the room. I wonder who he is. He called Zhang Ya into the office. It must be her teacher. After that, Zhang Ya ran out of the office. Holding her hand, the man chased her, cursing the whole way. All 5 girls in the dance studio witnessed it, but they all sat in place. None of them wanted to help Zhang Ya. But why? The man said a lot of unpleasant things as he approached Zhang Ya. I wonder what kind of man he was. Zhang Ya's hands reached to the edge of the window behind her. She ran to the open window. There was only one way out for her. The girl climbed onto the edge of the window and then fell out. The girls saw everything that had just happened. The man was shocked by what was happening. Zhang Ya fell from a high floor, screaming terribly as she fell. The protagonist saw the whole picture. He realized what had happened. This man had driven her to suicide. The other girls didn't say a word either. Once she fell out the window, she became taboo at school. Dressed in red dancing shoes and a bloody school uniform, no one even mentioned her name. Chen Gei exclaimed that he now knew her story. The boy said he wasn't leaving. He just wanted to help her. The girl looked down sadly. He heard someone laugh behind him. Was it Zhang Peng who was chasing him? The man asked him if he was surprised to see him and said he was too careless. Now he'll definitely pay for this. The man pulled out his huge shiny knife, but a ghost appeared behind him. The man realized he had now arrived. The ghost girl was behind him. She began to approach faster and faster. The man cried out in some kind of horror. Behind him was a ghost. There's a ghost from the mirror in his body. The protagonist asks why he's afraid of its ghost. The ghost girl's gaze was utterly eerie. A thin, blood-red haze emanated from her eyes. The man asked her not to come closer. Sweat was running down his face. The protagonist saw the ghost flying away. He asked Zhang Ya to wait for him. The boy called Captain Li. He explained that he was at the West Jujiang Private Academy and that Zhang Peng was there. The captain asked him why he was in this place at such a time and if he was okay. Chenga replied that everything was fine. He also discovered another murder case at a private academy in western Jujiang. 4 years ago, a student named Zhang Ya jumped from a building, but her death was more than suicide. She was forced to do it. The captain asked if he was sure of what he was saying. Chen Gei replied that they would discuss it later, but for now, they needed to catch Zhang Peng. The ghost girl returned and pointed in the direction. The protagonist realized he needed to go there. In front of him was a door with a sign that said inventory. What does this girl want? He began to open the door. It was colder in there than outside. Zhang Ya brought him here, so there's something important here. The boy glanced at a chest. There was a pile of dancing shoes underneath him. These shoes were hidden under the floorboards. The protagonist realized that one of them belonged to Zhang Ya. He came closer. Chenga asked the girl not to worry. He promised to sort out everything that happened here. Suddenly, his phone rang. It was his haunted house. The system informed him that he had managed to find Zhang Ya's red dancing shoes before dawn. Mission completion rate, 50%. Zhang Ya's affection level has increased. Her favor has grown. He can write a request for her to fulfill. Chengo realized he could accomplish part of the mission. Today's experience might have been painful, but at least the outcome was good. His demand must not be against Zhang Ya's will. This is the only condition. Zhang Ya is a scarlet ghost. She's different from her. She likes him. She likes him more when he's dead. The protagonist hoped that the girl named Zhang Ya would listen to him forever. Zhang Ya will listen to him forever. Of course, that's what the protagonist wanted to think. But the system said that it was a pity. His wish was going against Zhang Ya's will. The system asked the boy to change it. Chen-ge picked up the phone, hoping Zhang Ya would protect him from danger. The system again reported that his wish was going against the girl's will and asked him to change it. Chen-ge hoped that Zhang Ya wouldn't harm him or have any intention of killing him. He asked the system if this was feasible. The system responded that his desire was going against the girl's will and asked him to change it. The boy couldn't understand why. He even felt a little hurt and decided to deal with it later. But for now, he needed to find Zhang Peng. The boy was congratulated on completing the Red Ghost's Bloody Heart mission. This mission is part of a side mission for the 4-star Afterlife School scenario. Fear Factor's Afterlife School has 4 stars. The 1-star scene scared the medical students to tears. I wonder how scary the 4-star scene will be. A 1-star scenario may be open to everyone, but entry into scenarios that had 3 stars or higher should be restricted to everyone except those who survived the 1-star and 2-star scenarios. This means that they will have a new experience every time, and this will definitely increase the popularity of his haunted house. This makes the protagonist feel like he's some kind of dungeon master. Suddenly, the policeman's phone rings. Captain Lee asked the boy where he was. He informed him that they were there. Chen-ge told the captain that he would tell him everything now. A man who worked there was to blame for Zhang Ya's death. He may not have killed only her. He found a large number of shoes in the room and thinks he was collecting them. The captain asked why there was always murder wherever he was. Then he told him to relax, since he didn't suspect him, so he could continue his story. One of the police officers reported to Captain Lee that they had been unable to find Zhang Peng. But a driver by the road said he had seen a strange man. The captain exclaimed that the man had escaped from them again. He told Chen-ge it was time to go home. That idiot wouldn't get far. He'd circle around him like a shark. So he advised the boy to be careful. He said that Chen-ge must stay home, and that was an order. The protagonist promised to stay home and go nowhere else. It was already quite light and he was very tired. When he had enough money, maybe he should rent an apartment. The boy decided to study the reward better in order to make the most of this chance. The system produced Zhang Ya, the Scarlet Ghost. He's different from her. She likes him, but she likes him dead better. He could ask Zhang Ya for a favor, since he'd completed her Bloody Heart mission. But wouldn't it be too much of a loss if he asked her to destroy the mirror monster for him? The protagonist remembered that he had forgotten to close the window when he left. Perhaps he was too tired. Chen-ge heard a sound. The fugitive Peng appeared in the doorway. A huge, sharp dagger gleamed in his hands. The man exclaimed, looking angrily at the boy, that today he would certainly die. Chen-ge was surprised the man had found him so quickly. When he swung his knife at the boy, the protagonist skillfully dodged it. He told the man that he was very brave to come back here for him. The man exclaimed that he would get him even if he died. Chen-ge said he wasn't going to die with him and decided to attack the enemy. He raised his bloody hammer and tried to strike the man. The man tried to dodge and parried the blow, but the protagonist was surprised that the man could still stand, as the second blow landed on his head. Streams of scarlet blood flowed from Peng's head. The boy realized that the mirror monster was behind him, protecting Zhang Peng. Chen-ge grabbed his phone, realizing he couldn't handle these two. He needed to call for help. The protagonist looked at the monster hiding behind the man. It was a huge black shadow. An evil shadow emerged from behind him and headed towards Chen-ge. The boy fell to the floor. He didn't know how to fight this ghost. Chen-ge pressed his face to the floor. The man raised his dagger and began to approach the boy. He exclaimed that he would kill him now. The protagonist's eyes changed. He decided that his time had come. He tried to tap the phone's touchscreen. His fingers landed on Zhang Ya's photo. Everything around glowed with bright scarlet colors. These rays of bright light mingled with the black ghost. They enveloped the protagonist too. He tried to understand what was happening. A ghost girl appeared before him. It was Zhang Ya. She flew as high as she could. The girl began to fight with the dark, creepy ghost. Pan exclaimed that the ghost had appeared again. He became very frightened and decided to run away. But it was not to be. The protagonist's enormous bloody hammer appeared above his head again. The boy exclaimed that the man couldn't escape him. He moved closer to Pan, and raising his weapon, he struck him on the head with all his might. The man flew to the side. The protagonist sent him flying. Chen-ge asked him to get some sleep. The man began to scream in pain. Suddenly, the black ghost shattered into pieces. The boy looked away and asked Zhang Ya to stop immediately. The ghost girl began to eat the second ghost piece by piece. She ate these pieces, smacking her lips with relish. The girl's cheeks were practically bursting. Apparently she really liked this ghost. Chen-gu realized that she had simply eaten half of the mirror monster like that. The girl sprayed the other half of the monster right into his eyes. The boy started rubbing his eyes with his fist. He was in pain. He couldn't understand what was happening. His eyes hurt so much, why now? When he wiped his eyes and opened them, he noticed there was no one around him. The mirror monster had been taken care of, so there shouldn't be a new issue this evening. The boy called Captain Lee and told him that Zhang Ping was there, unconscious and unable to escape. They were currently in his haunted house. The captain started shouting that he was always in the most dangerous situation. He exclaimed that they would be there immediately and asked if everything was okay. Chen Ge replied that it was finally over and he could rest. The murder case was finally closed. The mirror monster had been eaten by Zhang Ya, so there are no more hidden threats in his haunted house, which means he can finally reveal all the scenarios to the general public tomorrow morning. What he should focus on next is expanding the haunted house, because new scenarios won't be unlocked without the expansion. After he wakes up, he must talk to Uncle Shu. He must by any means necessary convince him to let him rent the underground parking lot. The boy was resting when Xiaowan called him. He told her she could rest that morning, and he asked him to come back in the afternoon. Xiaowan told the boss there were a lot of people down there, even the police and reporters. She asked what he'd done wrong. Chen Ge immediately looked out the window and wondered why there were so many people here. The girl asked him to give in while he still could. The boy exclaimed that he had done nothing. He asked her to wait for him and promised to come down. The door to the park opened. Visitors exclaimed that it was the owner of the house. Chen Ge welcomed everyone to his haunted house. He asked if any of the visitors could explain what was going on here. A police officer appeared in the crowd and asked to be let through. He asked if he was Chen Ge. The man explained that he had been looking for him for a long time. The boy asked who he was. The man replied that he was Captain Yan. He was a classmate of Old Man Li from Zhujiang. In fact, he'd talked a lot about him. Chen Ge noticed that this man in uniform was very strange. He wondered what he wanted from him. He hoped he wouldn't get into trouble. The police officer told the protagonist that he now needed to make an announcement to the media. He would be given a reward for providing crucial evidence in the Ping'an apartment murder case. Specifically, the third-level Public Security Medal of Honor. He hopes Chen Ge will appreciate this honor and continue to contribute to maintaining and improving public safety. Everyone congratulated the young man on receiving such an honorable award. Chen Ge thanked him. The man explained that he needed to go to the city's main bureau in person to receive the award. He can now go and receive his reward. Chen Ge thanked Officer Yan from the bottom of his heart. He was very happy to receive it. The officer asked to take some photos. Xiaowan approached the main character and asked her boss if he would be on television again. An old man saw him and congratulated him on receiving his medal. It was Uncle Shu, the amusement park administrator. Chen Ge asked about the underground parking lease and said the money would arrive soon, but the man replied that it wasn't about the money. He can't sit back and watch as he digs his own grave. The number of visitors is steadily declining, and everyone is trying to flee, something he doesn't understand. Chen Ge replied that he understood and knew what he was doing. Uncle remarked that since he wouldn't back down, he wouldn't do it again. He'd already arranged to rent an underground parking space, but he has one condition. He needs to succeed within 3 months, because a new amusement park will soon be built nearby. He hadn't seen a free rental agreement before. He'd stamped the document, so the agreement would be valid until the park closed, so he could use it and not be let down. He should be very busy from now on, so he wouldn't keep him any longer. The boy thanked him and promised to make the park famous. In front of us is an underground parking lot. Chen Ge exclaimed that it takes up 1/3 of the park's area and that it's simply wonderful. I wonder how many scenes he can fit in here. The system reported that he had met the criteria to enable the first expansion of the haunted house. A suitable location must be found as soon as possible. The guy couldn't find any instructions, so it looked like he'd have to slowly explore it on his own. Why couldn't he put Zhang Ya and Xiao Xiao in the ghost house? There must be other conditions. The system asked if he was sure he wanted to place the entrance here, and asked him to choose the expansion direction. The protagonist saw a virtual representation of reality before him. He was quite surprised by it. That was really cool. The grid on the phone matches the parking lot. Simply drag and drop to activate this location. The system congratulated you on completing its first expansion. A special reward has been received. A unique instruction. The midnight cash register is broken. Now he can attract special customers who are different from the rest and can lend him a helping hand. The boy wondered what it meant to attract special visitors. Ghosts or tourists? Maybe it meant he could recruit members for a haunted house. Xiaowan appeared and told the boss that buns had arrived downstairs. She smiled sweetly at the boy. Chen Gu told the girl he'd be right there. She asked what the boss was doing in the underground parking garage. The boy laughed and replied that from now on this was their territory. He was there to connect it to the house. Now they need more new equipment. He pointed at it and said it was their new cash register. The girl exclaimed that he was simply the best boss. Their haunted house could use some new equipment. Xiaowan said it was all about him and that he was famous now. She showed him the phone and exclaimed that they'd soon be making headlines. The protagonist replied that that would be simply fantastic. The boy felt the midnight cashier's effect kick in, even if the chance was 1 in 1,000. Xiaowan asked if he'd lost anything. Based on his previous experience, nothing good can come of this. But it's still daytime, and he doesn't think a ghost or some kind of monster will appear. He heard a woman telling a child that she truly can't help him. Chenju immediately turned to the woman. She greeted him and asked the boy for 2 tickets. The protagonist was very surprised when he saw a child in front of him. A very unexpected turn of events. He didn't expect the special visitor to be a child. The little one was quite strange and cast a piercing glance at Chen Gei. The boy's mother asked the boss again if they could have 2 tickets. The protagonist apologized and explained that their haunted house had an age restriction, prohibiting entry to anyone under 14. The child's mother asked for an exception. Chen Ge asked why they insisted on visiting the haunted house. There were so many scary things there, and it could cause great trauma. He told the boy that he shouldn't go to such places for now. The mother explained that Fang Yu was different from most children and didn't like to talk, so she hoped he wouldn't be offended by his behavior. Chen Gei replied that everything was fine, and he would allow them to pass, but only with him. They were not married in life, but when they die, they will be buried in the same grave. The theme of this scene is marriage. The protagonist asked Fang Yu what he was doing. His eyes were full of surprise. The mother also looked in the boy's direction. She immediately called him. The woman ran up to the boy, who was leaning into the well, and asked him what he was doing. His mother explained that it was dangerous. Xiaowan approached her and asked why she had let the child in. The woman began screaming that it was a ghost, but the protagonist told her not to worry, as he was just an actor. Xiaowan noticed that the child was very cute and exclaimed that she liked him. Chen Gei explained that this child was special. He's not at all afraid of their haunted house. His mother explained that Fang Yu is a little different from boys his age. He became like that after the tragedy that befell his parents several years ago. They'd seen many doctors, but nothing had helped. The girl was surprised that the woman wasn't his mother. She replied that she was his aunt. Fang Yu's parents were teachers at Muyan Middle School. They disappeared one day and have never been found. The boy was only 5 years old at the time. She didn't know how to explain it to him, so she could only say that his parents had left. She said they were in a faraway place called Paradise. The mother thanked the children and said they were going home. Xiaowan said the boy was very interesting. He wasn't afraid of her and made her look for something. She asked him what he was looking for. When the girl asked the boy about it, he replied that he was looking for paradise. Suddenly, the protagonist received a notification. Different choices lead to different results. The first special visitor left. He made the right choice during his visit. The system congratulated him on receiving a reward. This mission was a test for Muyan Middle School. Chen Gei decided that the previous mission required him to find the killer, and this mission required him to survive until dawn. On the one hand, it looks simpler, but the black phone must have its own reasons for giving this mission a 2-star rating. The boy decided not to let these two escape. He needed to gather more information. He noticed the aunt and child getting into a taxi. The main character immediately ran to the side of the road and began to stop a taxi. Getting into the car, he asked the taxi driver to follow the bus that was driving in front of them. The driver immediately agreed. The boy was the key that launched the mission for Muyan Middle School, so he could be the key to solving the problem. The boy continued to follow the aunt and the child. When the taxi driver dropped him off at the appointed place, he followed them and started knocking on the door of the apartment where the two lived. His aunt opened the door. Chen Gei greeted her and asked if she still remembered him. He owned a haunted house at the amusement park, and his name was Chen Gei. The woman asked why he was there. Or perhaps they had caused some damage while visiting the haunted house. The boy thought about how he couldn't tell her he was here on a mission. He replied that it wasn't that. He was simply interested in the little boy's situation and had questions for him. Perhaps he could help him. He's a really good guy. He once helped the police solve a murder case and was awarded a Medal of Honor. The woman replied that she thought she'd heard something similar on the news earlier today. The boy remarked that it was about him. Then the woman began inviting the boy inside. She asked what exactly he wanted to know. The woman offered Chen Gei some water. He said it wasn't necessary. He just wanted to ask a few questions about the boy's parents. She replied that 3 years ago, Muyan Middle School was an ordinary school. When the parents returned home, the boy was nowhere to be found. They went looking for him, but in the end, only the boy returned. The boy thought it sounded like the reason his parents disappeared was also connected to the boy. Their last known location was unknown, but their bodies are most likely trapped in the well of Muyan Middle School. Perhaps because he witnessed the entire process, Fang Yu became like this. It's still unclear what happened and who was to blame for it all. Chungi asked if Fang Yu was an only child and if he had a brother or sister. After this question, the woman changed. She was very upset and began to explain to the boy. If her children hadn't had an accident, Fang Yu would have had a brother and sister to play with. The boy apologized and said he hadn't meant to upset her, but she still had Fang Yu. The woman said she simply wanted Fang Yu to be an ordinary child and grow up happily. Chen Gei inquired where Fang Yu had been found when his parents went looking for him. My aunt replied that he was at Muyan Middle School. He was hiding in her brother's office. Before it was closed, the police had to visit it almost every day due to constant fights. The school is haunted. According to old-timers, it was originally a crematorium, but it was torn down due to urban redevelopment. She advised her brother against looking for work there, but he simply refused to listen. He was passing a class drunk and was invited to take a photo. After the photo was taken, the students left, and he himself was unclear who ultimately took it. In the picture, he was sitting in a sealed classroom. Chen Ge held the photograph in his hands. He wondered if she'd called the police. Why were all the students turning their backs? It looked like a reflection in a mirror. The woman replied that although the students in the photograph were wearing Muyan Middle School uniforms, they were nowhere to be found inside the school. They had opened the sealed classroom and were watching closely. All they found were traces of her brother's presence in this room. Chen Gei sensed Fang Yu nearby. The boy opened the door and appeared on the threshold. His aunt asked him if they were disturbing him. She explained to the child that it was the boss from the amusement park. He had come to visit them. Did the boy remember him? Then the boy took something out of his pocket and handed it to the protagonist. It was some kind of paper package. Chen Gyu asked the boy if it was for him and what was inside. The envelope contained a drawing on a black background. It depicted red people. The aunt explained that the boy's favorite pastime was drawing. He doesn't like going out and often retreats to his room, enjoying being alone and drawing. She wants him to grow up happy, like a normal boy. The protagonist said everything was fine. He'd contact the doctor as soon as he could and they'd find a solution. When the boy left, he thought that both the aunt and the child were problematic in their own way. The question was, who was more problematic? A closed classroom, dead people, and a strange photograph. He tried to piece together the puzzles in his head. The red people probably don't represent his parents. There were too many of them in the drawing. The drawing is too dirty. What did the boy really mean? This picture is the key to the mystery. The main character's phone rang. He asked Hishan what was wrong. Hishan asked his boss to quickly open the video sharing app. He explained that someone was trying to steal his food. Chen Gei was surprised that someone else had opened a new haunted house. Hisheng replied that when he saw how many views their live stream had gotten, he decided to plagiarize it. Qin Guang's team was broadcasting live from Ping An's apartment. Chen Gu told him not to worry. Some things couldn't be copied. He asked if the boy was familiar with child psychology. He had a few questions for him. Does he still remember his eldest, whom he frightened so much that she cried? Her father is a psychologist and a tenured professor of criminal psychology. He'll ask if the girl can help him today. The guy asked his boss if he really didn't care about Qin Guang. Chen Gei replied that everything was fine, let him broadcast it. He'll be streaming today too, so Chen Gei won't forget to come and watch. Hishang told his boss he'll be up all night watching. Muyan Middle School. Mission requirements. Arrive at the mission site by 10:23 p.m. tonight and survive until dawn. The boy thought it was time to return and prepare. The Muyan Middle School mission was opening. Chen Ge found Muyan Middle School. He noticed that it was difficult to get to. It's a scary place, even taxi drivers didn't want to go there. It started raining again and it was difficult to find a car to get here. The driver even threw away the mat he was sitting on and quickly drove away. The rain continued to pour down. The boy remembered the woman saying there used to be a crematorium here. Could it really be that bad here? There are 4 side missions in Muyan Middle School. The pen spirit, the 5th toilet stall, the deep well, and the sealed classroom. If he wanted to fully unlock the scenario, he couldn't skip any of them. Any of the side missions could rival the nightmare mission in horror. He must complete all 4 in one night. It's not yet midnight, and he must scout out these locations. If the difficulty is too high, he'll still have time to leave. At the end of the hallway, there's a classroom that's always locked. So this classroom could be the center of paranormal activity at Mu Yan Middle School. The boy suddenly turned his head toward the door. 5 students had once infiltrated Mu Yan Middle School. They wanted to play a game of pen spirit for a bet in their senior year. He glanced at the pen and paper and wondered if they could have left behind a pen and paper. It had a phrase written on it. When will I die and who will die next? He knows that school children like to play such games. Since he needs to complete all 4 missions in Mu Yan Middle School, he can start with this one. The protagonist decided to go live. He immediately turned on the camera. He is currently at Mu Yan Middle School. This place used to be a crematorium, so it's full of burn marks. On the table in the room full of burn marks are some sheets of paper and a pen. It seems someone played the game Pen Spirit here, and they'll try it too. The boy began to speak, the spirit of the pen, from a past life, and said that he was its spirit in this life. He asked if he had the pen with him, to draw a circle on the paper. The boy began repeating this phrase several times in a row. Could it be that the spirit of the pen was refusing to answer his call? Why does it seem to him that several people have joined him in this room now? Sweat began to trickle down the boy's face. It was as if shadowy hands were reaching out toward him. They seemed to be helping draw a circle on paper. The protagonist couldn't figure out what it was, or if they had really arrived. They actually drew that circle with him. It seemed he heard his voice. It was time to ask a few questions. Chen-ge began asking the pen spirit if it knew where his parents were. As the boy drew a circle on the paper, he heard a crunching sound. It's strange, but it seems his parents' disappearance is more complicated than it seems. It seems he doesn't know the answer to his question. Fine. He'll just ask a random question to get this side mission over with. Chen-ge began repeating the phrase about the spirit of the pen. He asked if the spirit of the pen could tell him who his future wife would be. The shadow's hands began to nudge the pen and move it across the paper. Some writing appeared. The protagonist's eyes widened. Could it really be Xiao? It might be Xiao Wan. He still couldn't understand what was going on. She stopped and started cracking. The handle started to break into small pieces. Chen-ge was very surprised. The pen crumbled into small pieces. After that, some kind of light appeared in the room. Bright yellow and red colors mixed together. A ghost girl appeared in front of him. Could this really be Zhang Ya? But when the boy looked at the handle, it suddenly continued moving. The protagonist watched in amazement. It was clearly some kind of witchcraft. This game was truly real. Zhang Ya's name appeared on the paper, and Xiao's name was crossed out. The boy realized that the pen had crossed out the previous inscription and written Zhang Ya. He asked the spirit of the pen if it was sure that he had intended to write this name all along. He asked if the spirit of the pen could hear him now, to draw a circle. Chen-ge picked up the phone. His popularity soared, with the broadcast reaching 20,000 views, a completely new record. The boy thanked her for her support. He explained that it was a trick of the pen's spirit and asked her not to try it at home. Afterwards, he decided to move on to the next location. There are 3 side missions left: a sealed classroom, a deep well, and the 5th toilet stall. The next mission will be the 5th toilet stall. There are 3 hours left until midnight. 1 hour for each mission should be enough. Suddenly, the protagonist's phone rang. He wondered whose number it was. He answered the phone and asked who it was. They greeted him and asked if he knew Gao Jie. The man said he was her father. He explained that Chen-ge had encountered a strange boy whom he suspected was suffering from a psychological problem. He asked for more information about this boy. Chen-ge replied that he didn't think he'd be contacted so soon. Indeed, he's physically healthy, but it's as if he lives in another world. He refuses to interact with others and is afraid of sunlight. He met this boy at the entrance to the haunted house. He enjoyed playing there and wasn't at all afraid, like other people. He felt more comfortable in the darkness than in the sunlight. He felt the dark corners gave him a sense of security. The boy even showed interest in the actor, who was wearing cadaver makeup. The man replied that he suspected it might be a sign of bipolar disorder, which is very destructive. When he's angry, he's very aggressive, but he retreats into his own world. His personal opinion is that since the boy's relationship changes are related to haunted houses, then the source of his problem must be related to the haunted house. Chen-ge thought that the biggest difference between his haunted house and other houses was that his house actually had a ghost. Fang Yu loves visiting haunted houses. The protagonist pieced together the events into a coherent whole. If he enjoys visiting haunted houses, then he enjoys being in the company of ghosts. The boy suddenly remembered the drawing that the boy had given him. It was a small roll of paper with a picture of a black house and red men on it. Before arriving at Mu Yan Middle School, he assumed it referred to one of the school buildings. But none of the buildings matched the drawing. If Fang Yu really draws the house he lives in and these red men, then most likely Fang Yu's house is filled with ghosts. If someone had the intention of harming Fang Yu's parents, the protagonist paused in thought. Why did the killer, with the ability to perfectly hide the bodies and remove all traces from the crime scene, let Fang Yu go? Unless the killer hadn't noticed the boy, or wasn't the boy himself. Chen Gei imagined the bloody scene before him. Suddenly the man on the phone asked him if he was still there. It turned out they hadn't disconnected. The boy apologized to Dr. Gao and replied that he was still there. The doctor said he'd just read the information too. He was interested in the patient he'd mentioned. He asked if the boy could bring him to him. Chen Go replied that was fine. He would save his number and, if possible, would bring him to him. The protagonist saw that he was there. This must be the location of the 5th toilet stall mission. He thought that perhaps an unpleasant surprise was waiting for him behind the door in front of him. The boy had a very bad feeling about this, but he walked up to the door and started pulling on the handle. The protagonist opened the door and shone his flashlight inside. His eyes widened as he saw what was before him. When he entered the toilet, all the walls were covered in graffiti. They had large eyes painted on them. Chen Ge wondered why there were so many eyes on the walls. There wasn't a single spot without them. Chen Ge wondered why there were so many eyes on the walls. What kind of lunatic did this, and why? It looks scary, but they're just drawings. The boy noticed that one eye was different from the others. When he shone the flashlights, he saw that it was a peephole into another booth. All the other eyes were just a distraction. It was there to hide that one peephole. Someone had once been spying from booth number 6 on the person in booth number 5. Now that he'd uncovered the secret of the 5th booth, he was wondering how to complete the mission. Should he stay in the 5th booth, lest someone come and spy on him? If it came down to it, he wouldn't mind giving that pervert a black eye, but he thinks it's better to meet him head-on. Raising his hammer, the protagonist decides that the best defense is a good offense. He decided to lie in wait for this pervert. And so he remained sitting in the 6th toilet stall. The boy suddenly felt someone's footsteps. Someone was definitely coming this way. They're right next to him. Isn't that a violation of order? Chen Gei peered through the peephole. According to the mission description, he's supposed to be in booth number 5. Shouldn't it be someone terrible? Where did these kids come from? If his opponents are these two, he will feel like an evil person. Another side mission related to the well mentions a brother and sister. Since the well is connected to Fang Yu, could these children be the aunt's son and daughter? But why did they appear here? The strangest thing for the boy was that they looked as if something was stalking them. There really was some kind of ghost before them. The children sat on the floor and huddled close to each other, began to cry. Chen-gu realized it was finally here. A red shadow stood before him. He decided it was time to begin. The boy broke down the wall with his hammer. He exclaimed to the red shadow that he would be her opponent. The protagonist gritted his teeth and rushed forward. Everything around him began to glow with a bright yellow light. He began to attack the angry red shadow. The shadow fell to the ground and began coughing. Chen Gei knocked it down with his enormous bloody hammer. Then she rose to her feet and, growling loudly, began to run away through the door. The boy wondered if this creature had forgotten its ghostly nature. He watched the fleeing shadows. Behind him, children started crying. He remembered they were in a toilet stall. The boy turned to them and asked them to stop crying. He asked why they were acting like victims, but the children continued to cry and cling to each other. Chen Gei asked if he had frightened them. Suddenly, the children started running away, screaming that a monster was coming. The protagonist asked where they were running. He asked them to stop and not run away. He just wanted to ask them something. Do they know a boy named Fang Yu? But the boy held the girl's hand and ran away without stopping. Chen Ge noticed that they had disappeared in an instant. Where could they have hidden? The boy approached the teacher's lounge and thought they had brought him there on purpose. Fang Yu's briefcase lay before him. He guessed because it contained letters with little red men on them. This meant the boy had begun drawing ghosts at an early age. It was entirely possible that this study belonged to the boy's father. He was a math teacher at Muyan Middle School. Fang Yu's aunt said his father had been fired from another school for drinking, and other schools refused to hire him. What mistake did the boy's father really make? I wonder what kind of person Fang Yu's father was. The protagonist walked up to one of the desks and pulled open a cabinet. The desk was filled with letters, suggesting he was writing something down. It stated that they knew what Teacher Fang was doing in stall 6 of the women's restroom on the 3rd floor. They demanded that he apologize to the girl immediately. It seems the protagonist was right, and Fang Yu's aunt was hiding something important from him. He remembered the booth with the many drawn eyes, so Fang Yu's father was the one spying. There were 3 notes in total, but the handwriting on all 3 was different. This means that at least 3 people knew about the math teacher's dirty secret. The handwriting on the paper was very clear. Teacher Fang likely kept these notes to identify the students responsible. Comparing the handwriting and contents of these notes, it appears they were written by students. Could it be that they were the ones who threw the teacher down the well? He must have missed something. An open apology was out of the question. If such a fact were to become public knowledge, his life would be ruined. To sum it up, the students who learned of their teacher's secret were unable to achieve their goals and ultimately got rid of him. The notes mentioned a girl for whom they were demanding an apology. If he could find her, many issues would be resolved. But where would he find this girl? It's already 22:30. He doesn't have much time to complete the 2 remaining missions. If he keeps this up, he'll never succeed. Additional mission: closed class. The class possessed powerful yin energy, which is why the director kept it closed. Some staff moved the class further if their academic performance was poor, but the director refused to do so as not to create divisions. The protagonist told his friends that they would now learn the whole truth about this place. And now they were inside the legendary closed classroom. Chen-Gei asked if they could see everything clearly. It's no different from the other classrooms, only a little quieter. It looks like something's carved into the table. Chen-Gei approached the table and noticed that the writing on it appeared to have been left by Teacher Fang's victim. The eyes in the toilet had left her deeply traumatized. Combined with Teacher Fang's other actions, this prompted the poor girl to turn to that damned class for help. Suddenly, the pen flew off the table. The protagonist immediately glanced in that direction, beads of sweat trickling down his face. He was very interested. A hand from under the table returned the pen to its place. The boy smiled and thanked the stranger for giving him the pen, but then he wondered where that hand had come from. It was as if an electric shock had struck the protagonist. After that, he decided to calm himself down. He began to think that it was just a hallucination. But then the boy picked up his huge bloody hammer and asked who was there. He asked the stranger to show himself. The classroom, which no one ever entered, was crowded at midnight. But it was empty. It was now almost 12 o'clock. In the classroom, shadows of students sat on every chair at the desks. It was as if they were studying at this hour. The shadows looked ahead, as if waiting for midnight. The protagonist decided this side mission was impossible and decided to leave. The rumors seemed to be true. An entire class was transformed into ghosts and remained bound to this place. As the boy started to leave, someone called out to him. They called his name. The boy paused. Could it really be a ghost calling him? He was completely covered in sweat. Meanwhile, lightning continued to flash outside. The rain poured down. Someone called the boy's name again. He couldn't figure out who the man in the cloak was. It was Fang Yu's aunt. She said she didn't think he would actually come to this place. She was here to save him. The protagonist was very surprised to see Fang Yu's aunt there. He asked what it meant to save him. His aunt explained that she had seen a drawing of Fang Yu's, and it depicted him. The people in the boy's drawings were always red. This was the first time she'd seen him add a black figure. She thought about it for a long time, and came to the conclusion that he must be the figure, because he's the only stranger who's visited their home in the last month. Chen-Gei asked why the other figures were red. What's the difference between red and black figures? Auntie replied that the red figures represent ghosts. The black figure, she thought, represented a living person. Chen-Gei again imagined the scene before him. He thought about how this woman must have known that Fang Yu could see ghosts. Even before that unfortunate incident with Fang Yu's parents, she had already known that the boy could see things that normal people couldn't. She told his parents about it, but they didn't believe in ghosts. One day, her husband and children were in a car accident. It was the darkest period of her life. She fainted every time she saw their photographs. When this happened again, Fang Yu approached her with his drawing. He handed it to his aunt. It depicted 2 little red children living in a black house. Aunt said that he explained to her that the red children were his brother and sister. Chen-Ge replied that even if her words were true, a child's drawing still proved nothing. Auntie remarked that she knew he wouldn't believe her easily. You need to turn the drawing over and look at it from the other side. According to legend, this school has an old well that has already claimed many lives. There are ghosts coming out of the well and he is standing right next to it, which clearly indicates that he has become a target for the ghosts. If he stayed here, anything could happen. The woman asked him to trust her. She insisted she was telling the truth. The protagonist replied that he seemed to have misunderstood her. Since she was about to leave, he offered to go with her. That way they could cover each other if something happened. The boy headed toward the exit. He exclaimed that the place gave him goosebumps. Suddenly the boy's gaze changed. The woman pulled a huge sharp knife from her bosom and exclaimed that he must die. The protagonist said he knew she wasn't so simple. He took out his huge hammer. The boy swung the hammer and hit his aunt. She flew far to the floor. He had suspected her ever since he visited her house. Now she showed her true colors. The drawing on the back of the sheet was her own. He asked if she really thought a child's drawing could be so easily faked. After all, she was the one who killed Fang Yu's parents. The woman exclaimed that she hadn't intended to kill anyone. He had no idea what really happened that night. The real killer was Fang Yu's father. Chenga thought it was true, but he could tell one thing for sure. She was one of the murderers. Why was she blaming a dead man for everything? Could that really be her argument? The aunt replied that her brother was a bad man, and that he had driven an innocent girl crazy. She had heard that the girl had ultimately committed suicide. After this happened, her older brother became even more paranoid and twitchy, often blabbering about how someone had found him. Her sister-in-law couldn't take it anymore and filed for divorce, but her brother simply wouldn't let her leave. Backed into a corner, she threatened him that if he didn't agree to a divorce, she would expose him to the whole world. The boy asked how her brother had reacted. His aunt replied that he'd spent the whole day thinking it over before agreeing to her demands. He'd simply been pondering how to carry out the murder. He locked Fang Yu in his study and returned home alone. He then tricked her daughter-in-law into looking for him with him. When she returned home, none of them had returned yet. She was worried and went to Muyan's school herself to look for them. There's an old well on the hill. A landslide had occurred a few days earlier, burying it. When she arrived, her brother was digging it out. Then she noticed his wife's body lying next to the well. After she caught him, he left her with only 2 options. Then she realized her brother had gone mad. He gave her a choice: either help him hide the body or die herself. The protagonist told the woman that she had probably decided to help him and then killed him. The aunt replied that, to save her own life, she simply had no choice but to listen to him. If she hadn't done this, she would have been dead. And after his murder, she became Fang Yu's only relative. She no longer had to share him with anyone else. The woman exclaimed that her children had already taken control of Fang Yu's body. He had long since become not only her brother's child, but hers. She loved him and would give him all her love. Chenga replied that if she truly loved Fang Yu, she wouldn't have done this. Her love only benefits herself. It's incredibly selfish. The boy was forced to live with his parents' killer. He couldn't do anything about it. It is no wonder that his mental development was so retarded. She was the one who caused this. The woman bowed her head and began to cry. Suddenly the boy heard a sound. It was as if someone had appeared nearby. Most likely they were ghosts. Many shadows hovered around. The woman put her hand to her face and looked out the window. The protagonist asked her to be quiet, after which they quickly began to run away from there. She asked if he had seen what she had seen. Chen-go replied that he had been on the school grounds for so long, yet they hadn't attacked him. It seemed they weren't evil spirits. The people who sent warnings to Fang Yu's father were spirits. They were only trying to protect the students of this school. And so it was late at night. It was 1:30, and the protagonist and the woman went outside. The boy heard a policeman's voice. He said he heard Chen-ge's voice and asked if he was there. The protagonist replied that everything was fine. The suspect had already been detained. The police officer exclaimed that it was him again, the same man calling the hotline 3 times in 1 week. This is the first such incident in the 35-year history of their police station. Even the officer who handles the calls already feels like he can now recognize his voice. Chen-ge replied that he was simply cooperating with the police as a decent citizen to build a good society. She was one of the murderers. The other was already dead. The bodies were thrown into a well, somewhere in the school's backyard. She must know the exact location. He thinks they'll have a better chance of finding out from her. The police officer ordered the crime scene to be sealed and to wait for a team with tools to arrive before excavation could begin. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the well at Muyan Middle School was finally found. By 4:30, the well had been completely dug up, and 2 bodies were recovered. And so the protagonist finally found himself at home. He decided to get some rest. Another tense night had passed. The boy decided to see how he had accomplished his mission. He managed to reach the location in time and survived until dawn. The mission was completed. A new scenario was unlocked, and the player can freely manipulate the props from the set. Chen-go said that this mission had been easier than he expected. He needed to look at all the rewards. The system offered to examine the interior layout. The protagonist noticed that the size was twice as large as the standard scenario. Just don't let them say that Muyan School has moved here. The boy opened the door and walked into the hallway. Wow. This school is just as huge as Muyan's school. There are 4 classrooms, huge long corridors, restrooms, and offices. But the layout was changed so that all the facilities were closer together. This classroom is remarkably similar to the closed classroom at Muyan Middle School. But there are some differences. The boy noticed someone's uniform on the desk. Why is this the only class with a school uniform? Could the shape symbolize lingering spirits? The new haunted house scenario has become a new home for Xiao Xiao's family. By the same logic, it's only a 2-star scenario, and already so complex. If he unlocks a few more scenarios, this underground parking lot will definitely become a labyrinth of horrors. The boy thought he'd come to the place where he'd played with the spirit of the pen. Suddenly, his phone rang. It seems his questions caused the pen to break. The boy asked the spirit of the pen if it was still alive. And if so, he wanted an answer. The cursed ballpoint pen was broken, and the pen spirit refused to answer his question. It turned its gaze on him, but then fled. Chen Go told the pen spirit that he knew it held a grudge against him, and asked him not to worry, as he would fix it. Captain Lee called him. He asked if the boy wasn't too busy to stop by the police station. The killer wanted to talk to him. The police station is back in front of us. The protagonist heads toward the main entrance. He entered the cell where the woman sat. She waited for Chen Gei with her head down. When the boy entered the cell, he asked if she wanted to talk to him. The woman asked if he still had the drawings she had given him. She had done everything she could for Fang Yu over the past 3 years. But the first living person who appeared in his drawing turned out to be the main character. Chen Gu replied that things might not be as simple as she thought. Fang Yu probably thought he was similar. The boy suddenly perked up. He realized they could see the same thing. The woman was surprised. Could it really be true? After all, the main character was also quite unusual. She handed over the drawing and said it was his gift. The aunt was wearing handcuffs. The boy asked if that was why she had called him here. The woman bowed her head before answering. She explained that she was Fang Yu's only remaining relative. Now she would have to leave him. The boy had an unusual personality, so he wouldn't be able to make friends. She doesn't ask him to take him in, but she does ask him to visit when he has time, to talk to him, and to make sure the other kids aren't bullying him. Chen Ge promised the woman he would do everything he could to look after the boy. She thanked him and called him a good man. And here we are at Fang Yu's house. The social worker told the protagonist that she wanted to take the boy for a medical examination. Chen Ge asked Fang Yu not to worry. He promised to visit him often. Meanwhile, the boy was drawing something on paper. The boy noticed that his painting was much different this time, and asked where the red men were. Fang Yu replied that they had found a new home. Chen Ge asked if they had left. The social worker said they needed to pick up the child. Chen Ge told the boy they would see him when he had some free time. The social worker called Mr. Xian kind. We need more people like him. The boy suddenly began to hand the main character some kind of box. Chen Ge asked him if it was him. When the boy started to leave, the protagonist opened the box. This box contained a photograph of my uncle sitting in a closed classroom and many other badges. It contained 24 school name tags with 24 different names. A group photo of 24 schoolchildren standing facing away from the camera. The protagonist asked Xiao Wan when he found himself on the street what was going on there, and who these people were. The girl told her boss that these people were looking for him. They wanted to talk to him about something. The guys explained that they were from Qinguang's studio. Last night, he had used an unconventional tactic. They asked him to cease his malicious attacks on Qinguang and issue a public apology on his personal page. But if he continues his attacks, things will get worse for him. They'll contact the streaming platform's administration to block him. Chen Ge asked why he should make a public apology. It wasn't him who used unethical tactics. They know perfectly well how to make a fuss, but they themselves know perfectly well who the real unethical plagiarist is here. The man remarked that rashness never benefits anyone. Why not think about it first? Chen Go found them persistent. If they weren't here to visit the haunted house, he asked them to step aside. They were blocking the path for genuine visitors. One of the guys asked why he thought they weren't there to visit a haunted house. They too wanted to experience what they called the scariest haunted house. If he's afraid they might expose his false advertising, then they won't come. Chen Ge immediately agreed, saying he likes clients who are looking for a thrill. He asked them to come in, but to remember to sign the liability waiver. The guy remarked that it was a good production. The game had already begun before they even entered. The protagonist thought that his game would make them cry with fear and laughed evilly. Chen Gu explained that this was their biggest stage at the moment, and they needed to test it out. Xiao Wan asked her boss not to go too far. Something might happen to the guests again. The boy asked her not to worry. He had a sense of proportion. One of the guys told the other that he had a very beautiful coworker and was jealous of her. The other replied that this wasn't their first visit to a haunted house. The atmosphere here isn't so bad. Chen-ge began to show them the entrance to the house. He opened a hatch in the floor. Since they were experienced guys, he wouldn't waste their time anymore. The guys were a little scared when they saw the underground room. They started walking down the steps. The guy mentioned that the stage was in the basement and that he had some interesting ideas. He turned on the camera and decided to make a video about visiting his haunted house and then post an online guide online. The guy asked if it would do any good. His friend told him that similar haunted houses keep the design of the scenarios and the construction of the trap a closely guarded secret. Publishing such a video review would immediately ruin the attraction. That's why haunted houses prohibit the use of video and photography. They have to maintain an aura of mystery to attract new visitors. Then the boys heard something. One of them told the other that this class was different from the others. There were uniforms laid out on the tables everywhere. The haunted house worker must hide inside this room, which is why its decorations are different from the others. The boys decided to definitely go into this room, and then the front door creaked. One of the boys turned his head in that direction. Sweat began to trickle down his face. They noticed that the door opened on its own. There must be some kind of control mechanism. This is a very common mechanism used in horror films. The guy decided to go ghost hunting, but the second one asked his friend if he minded if he waited there. The guy replied that he did, and that they would go together. What they promised each other before entering the haunted house. They said they would definitely stick together, but now he's giving up. Where does he think the haunted house staff might be hiding? Maybe they're hiding somewhere among the school uniforms. It's not entirely clear, but that's usually how they do it. It doesn't look like anyone's hiding here. There was really nothing to be afraid of, but one of the guys called his friend Fei Yuliang. Fei Yuliang asked him what happened and why he was screaming so loudly. The guy replied that he'd looked and there was someone in that drawer, in that desk, in front of them. Fei Yuliang decided he'd completely lost his mind. How can a person fit in a desk drawer? The guy said he actually saw a pair of eyes. He tried to convince his friend he wasn't lying. He swore on his life that he'd seen them. Fei Yuliang glanced at the uniform and wondered why he'd thrown it on the floor and why it was now lying on the table. They'd been here the whole time. He asked Zhu Jianing if he'd been the one who'd picked up the uniform from the floor and placed it on the table. Zhu Jianing replied that he hadn't even seen the uniform that had fallen to the floor. The boys swallowed convulsively. The form did indeed appear on the table by itself. They continued to look in that direction. Zhu Jianing asked if they should continue. Fei Yuliang replied that he wasn't going to give up since it hadn't even been 5 minutes. Zhu Jianing was supposed to be a muscle man, but he was acting like a little girl. As they walked forward, the form began to move. It seemed to have come to life or to contain a ghost. Why does this corridor seem endless? Fei Yuliang replied that they were here to destroy this place, not to promote this haunted house. He asked his friend to pull himself together, as there was nothing to worry about. A knocking and creaking sound was heard outside the door. The sounds grew louder and louder. The boys, drenched in sweat, turned their heads in that direction. Streams of white light emanated from the table. The form began to rise higher and higher. It was probably a ghost dressed in uniform. The boys' terror knew no bounds. The boys began to run away in immense fear. They screamed, not understanding what it was. Zhu Jianing exclaimed that she had been stalking them since that class. They needed to hide somewhere. Fei Yuliang quickly realized what was going on and opened the door to another classroom. He suggested they hide there. Before they could run in and close the door, they heard a sound. It seemed as if a shape had crashed into the closed door. What could that even be? The boys tried to catch their breath. Zhu Jianying said he hadn't seen anything, but it was definitely something in the school uniform. Fei Yuliang asked how big this haunted house was. Why were there so many rooms? The room looked like a dorm. Written on a piece of paper was a question about when I would die and who would die next. Zhu Jianing remarked that it resembled a spirit pen game, but something was very strange about it. Could there really be some hidden mechanism inside? Fei Yuliang asked if he remembered what the owner of the house had told them at the very beginning. There are 4 scenarios here at once, and they must visit them all to find the key to the exit. The boys finally began to think, freeing their minds from the fears. They had to concentrate. Does this mean they have to play the spirit pen game at least once to get the hint? They began to summon the spirit of the pen. The boys said it was their spirit from a past life. They were her spirit in this life. If this spirit is with them, then they asked to draw a circle on the paper in front of them. The handle actually began to move. It was enveloped in a haze of white light. The boys couldn't figure out which of them had moved the handle to the side. They looked at each other in amazement. Fei Yuliang exclaimed that it wasn't him. They were drenched in sweat. Had the spirit of the pen arrived? They didn't let go of it, trying not to give in to fear. Fei Yuliang said that people often think the spirit of the pen has arrived, but in reality, it's just a psychological effect, so it's all just a hoax. Zhao Jining replied that if it really was the spirit of the pen, then if they stopped playing and did not send the spirit of the pen away, they would be cursed by it until their death. Fei Yuliang decided to simply ask a question. He asked the pen spirit if it could tell him the name of his future wife. And then the pen started writing something. It told the guy that he would soon die. Fei Yuliang was scared to death. This must be one of those predetermined patterns. No matter what question he asks, the answer will probably be the same. But then they heard a sound again. What was going on? Their gazes were filled with horror. Zhu Jianing's eyes began to turn red. It was as if a ghost had possessed him. Fei Yuliang asked the boy what had happened to him. He began to reach out his hand towards him. But my friend's whole body began to shake with terror. He cried out that there was something behind him. A girl appeared. Apparently she was a ghost, not a person. She began to rise above them like a black shadow, her hair fluttering in the wind, and her smile fiery. Fei Yuliang had already buried himself. He froze in fear, looking at the ghost woman. Zhu Jining decided to give up and began to flee the room, exclaiming that he couldn't take it anymore. Fei Yuliang begged him not to run away, but his hand stopped dead in its tracks. The pen seemed stuck to his hand, and he couldn't let go. The boy asked the pen to stop, but it kept writing and writing. The pen wrote a lot of messages. It warned the boy that he would soon die, but Fei Yuliang begged her to stop. He pressed his other hand against his own, and the pen continued writing, after which the boy realized that it seemed to be all over. He finally caught his breath. Then the boy laughed and thought that he had worried for nothing. But then why had Zhu Jianying reacted like that? What did he see behind him? Long feminine hair hung over the boy's head. When he raised his head up, he saw a terrible ghost in front of him. He couldn't figure out what it was. The ghost girl's eyes were red inside. The boy started calling for help. He was foaming at the mouth with fear. His glasses were crooked, and his eyes were full of terror. The ghost woman loomed over him, drawing ever closer. Fei Yuliang even slipped on his chair, after which the boy fell to the floor in horror, a thin white vapor coming out of his mouth. Chen Gu exclaimed that he hadn't heard screams in a long time. It seemed he had underestimated these two. When he entered the room, the tables and chairs were pushed together. They had been there and seemed to have bumped into something. Zhu Jianing ran out of the room screaming, and the protagonist, wearing a bloody robe, asked him what was going on. Judging by where he came from, he was in the women's dorm, but there's nothing scary there. Zhu Jianing couldn't recover. He approached the protagonist, looking very frightened. Chenja asked him what he'd seen in the dorm. The boy started talking about the school uniform. The protagonist couldn't understand why he was alone. Where could his friend have gone? Zhu Jianing was screaming about some ghost. But weren't they calm when they were going through the script? Why is he going berserk now, like a mad dog? He didn't even have time to scare him. The guy screamed that it wasn't an actor. There were real ghosts in that haunted house. He ran to the women's restroom, screaming that it was definitely a ghost. The guy quickly closed the door behind him. He thought that his friend Fei Yuliang was still in the room, and it was very dangerous there. The ghost was standing right on his shoulders. The boy clutched his head and lamented that it was all a hoax. He needed to contact the people outside. This haunted house was terrifying. Zhu Jining called his brother Yuan, asking for his help, and saying that the haunted house was haunted by real ghosts. Brother Yuan asked if there weren't ghosts in a haunted house. The boy replied that he had seen one with his own eyes. It was the ghost of the hanged woman. Her face was crimson, her eyes bulging. The ghost stood on Fei Yuliang's brother's shoulders. Uncle laughed and asked if the workers had attacked them. He said they would be coming in now. Zhu Jianing said there were no workers in this haunted house. These weren't workers. They were a real ghost. The man asked what he was talking about, but suddenly there was silence, and the boy saw someone's feet under the toilet stall door. He decided a ghost had come here. It was the main character in a blood-red robe. Zhu Jianing sat in the women's restroom, crawling against the wall. He begged them not to touch him. He cried for help with tears in his eyes. He lost consciousness, and his friend continued talking on the phone. He asked if the boy was okay. He asked him to say something. The protagonist walked over to the phone and turned it off. The phone started ringing briefly. Didn't he warn him not to take photos or videos in the haunted house? Why didn't he listen? Chenga called Xiaowan and asked the girl to take this body from here, and he would find another one. The girl immediately obeyed her boss. The boy opened the door without looking inside. That guy ran out of the girl's dorm, so his friend should be here, but where did he go? The protagonist paused and looked ahead at the well. He realized the path led to a deep well. The boy began to approach the well closer and closer. Fei Yuliang was already there. His glasses fell into the well. The boy bent down to catch them. He was hanging by one hand in the well. Chengi exclaimed that he thought he'd found it. What could have happened to this guy? It seemed he'd angered more than just the pen spirit. This guy's condition is similar to what Hai-san experienced when he visited his haunted house. It's best to get him out of here first. The uncle started shouting and asking the protagonist what he had done to those guys. They were already sitting unconscious on the bench. How dare he allow his employees to assault customers? The man promised to sue him for sure. Chen Gei asked if anyone had seen his employees attack them. The man replied that they wanted to watch the CCTV footage to verify everything. He thinks this haunted house is dangerous for guests. Chen Gei replied that they would take 2 witnesses to make sure everything was fair. What happened when they entered the girls' dorm? The boys started looking at the camera. The boys drew circles with a pen. Then the pen started writing. It said that he would die. What is he doing? What happened there? Is this really a mental disorder? There's no use in this park's doctor. He needs to call the psychiatric hospital immediately. The camera showed Zhu Jining running away and Fei Yuliang falling from his chair. Visitors said one of them was scared half to death by his partner, but they noticed that the guy had gotten up again. When the guy stood up, he looked like a zombie. They wondered why he looked like a drunk. He seemed to be mumbling something. The man asked to turn up the volume quickly. Perhaps this guy was asking for help. He doesn't want to miss any evidence. After this photo, they saw the guy stop. The man asked them to zoom in on the camera and turn up the sound. The boy, speaking on behalf of the woman, said that she also considered this classroom their home, but she had a reason to leave. She needed to explain herself to Wang Xin. She promised to return when she was finished. This man was probably possessed by the spirit of the pen. The man asked what kind of nonsense this guy was talking about. Many ghostly hands tried to grab the boy and he asked them to stop. He said again in a feminine voice that she had to go and no one would stop her. He asked her to let her go. After that, the recording paused. There was some kind of interference and nothing could be seen. The man asked why there was no image. The audience laughed. They decided to switch to another camera, but nothing happened. Was he really going to jump into the well? The man asked for the volume to be turned up. Fei Yuliang said he could understand Chen Yalin's pain. She had her own reasons. In her place, he would have done exactly the same. After all, Wang Xin was her best friend. Then maybe they'll give her a chance. The boy knelt in front of the well, then reached into it. The man noticed the boy had fainted. Their company had clearly hurt him. Chen Gei asked him not to worry and to continue watching. Then the protagonist approached the boy and called for help. He exclaimed that there was another fainted man. The visitors noticed that the owner had done nothing wrong. If anything, he was trying to save their friend. They almost accused an innocent man. The system has granted assistance to a cute ghost. He was congratulated on launching Muyan High School's hidden 2-star scenario mission. This is a girl named Chen Yalin. The mission's goal is to find the pen spirit's best friend and fulfill her wish. Chen Gei has decided that hiring a real ghost to work in the haunted house is his dream. Unexpectedly, this day had arrived so soon. He decided to help the spirit of the pen fulfill its wish. The system alerted him that an important prop was leaving the House of Horrors. The protagonist immediately went outside. Why were they planning to leave? The boy would be angry. He headed in their direction and asked why they were leaving. After all, he hadn't dealt with them yet. Fei Yuliang approached and asked him to wait. Chen Gei reached into his pocket, and the boy asked what he was doing. He exclaimed that he had done nothing wrong. Then the boy pulled a tag out of his pocket. He asked why he was stealing props from a haunted house. The tag didn't belong to him and he thought he should call the police. The man immediately approached and apologized to the boss. He explained that the man was slightly injured, so they were returning him to him. First, Chen Gei needed them to delete all the recordings, otherwise they wouldn't leave this place. The man immediately began deleting all the videos. The main character told Zhao Wan that it looked like the haunted house would be temporarily closed today. The girl listened to the boy, but the customers were outraged and asked him not to close the shop. They'd been standing in line for so long. So many people would suffer because of a few mean people. After such behavior from Qin Guang's studio, the visitors promised to grind them into dust. This scenario is quite independent and can frighten people even without its intervention. In order for the lingering spirits of Muyan Middle School to obey him, the easiest way is to complete the hidden mission of this scenario. In the recording, the spirit pen, it seems, said 2 names. She named the girls, namely, Chen Yalin and Wang Xin. The boy seemed to hear it clearly. The protagonist started calling Captain Li. The officer asked what he'd discovered this time. The boy asked not to worry. This time he just needed his help finding one person. This is an ordinary schoolgirl named Chen Yalan. She must be one of the victims at Mu Yang Middle School 3 years ago. The boy said there was definitely no murder this time. He just wanted some information. The captain, after inquiring, replied that the child had died in a very strange way. Unfortunately, Chen Yalan was found hanged in her bedroom for unknown reasons. Coincidentally, that day her class was in an accident. The bus they were on fell off a dam. Everyone died, including the driver. The protagonist was very surprised. The captain explained that there was one person in the class who didn't go, so he survived. That person's name was Wang Xin. When Muyan School opened, it had 25 students, all from the orphanage. So, for them, it's not just a school, but also their home. This number completely coincides with the number of sets of school uniforms. The spirit of the pen said it wanted to find Wang Xin, the only survivor. The boy turned to Captain Li. He asked him to do him a favor. He said he wanted to meet Wang Xin. The city hospital building looms before us. Captain Li and the main character were there. They were in the girls' room. As far as the captain knows, Madame Gu later adopted her and admitted her to the hospital for examination. The boy came closer to the hospital bed. He leaned toward the girl, and he told her that her friend wanted to talk to her. So he took this pen with him. The girl sighed when she saw the pen. A hint of excitement seemed to appear in her eyes. The pen ended up on a piece of paper. The protagonist held it in his hand. The girl looked at him intently, trying to figure out what he was going to do. Chen Go started to say that the pen was his spirit from a past life, but the girl started jumping up and begging him not to. The boy continued to say that he was her spirit in this life. The girl put her hands to her head and asked him to stop, but the boy asked the spirit of the pen to answer him. Captain Li asked the boy what he was doing. Chen Ge explained that he was helping her deal with a problem that was gnawing at her heart. He asked Captain Li to give him 1 minute. He just needed 1 minute. The boy continued to conjure the spirit of the pen. Some writing began to appear on the sheet of paper. The girl clutched her head in her hands and began to cry. Someone told Wang Xin that she never imagined her stupid joke would cause such deep wounds to her heart. It had nothing to do with her death. She just wanted to scare her when she saw her with her new friend. Who knew the rope would be so strong? She hadn't done anything wrong. It was just a stupid prank that didn't go as planned. The girl couldn't stop crying. She's very sorry and asks her for forgiveness, but she hopes she can get rid of the bad memories and try to live a great life for everyone. The protagonist continued to talk with the spirit of the pen. He said that it was his spirit from a past life, and he was its spirit in this life. If she wanted to leave, he asked her to leave. Wang Xin couldn't stop crying. She said this world had grown dim, and everyone had fallen silent. All roads led to dead ends, and her feelings were misguided. She didn't understand what she had done wrong, but she felt like she had turned into a monster. She asked for help, to pull her out of this world. She wants to be free of this pain. Wang Xin asked for help with this. The boy listened to the girl and then caught his breath. He sighed calmly. Approaching her, he placed his hand on her head and asked her to rest now. He wished the girl good night. A man appeared at the door. He asked how Wang Xin was and what he had done to her. The protagonist replied that everything was fine, the girl was just sleeping. The man exclaimed that it was incredible. She's severely depressed and can't sleep without medication. The doctor was very surprised. Captain Li told the protagonist that he knew the guy was a little different from ordinary people. But Chen Ge laughed and thanked Captain Li for the praise. He said it was time for him to go. The system congratulated him on completing the hidden mission of the 2-star scenario. The next part of the hidden mission has been launched. He must create mannequins for 24 spirits. The boy glanced at his phone. He saw that a new mission had appeared. The protagonist looked at his team of ghosts. The pen spirit's wish had been successfully fulfilled. Even though she still doesn't have a burning desire to see him, she's grateful to him for his help. If he wanted to add the spirit of the pen to his team of haunted houseworkers, then let him make his choice. Chen Ge clicked the affirmative button. The ghost confirmed his agreement. The system congratulated him on hiring a special type of sinister ghost, a pen spirit. Chen Yalan offers daily fortune telling. All questions must be within the pen spirit's capabilities. The pen spirit feeds on the cries of terror of its visitors, but if he chose to isolate the spirit of the pen and harm it, it might decide to leave him. Chen Ge was certain that more ghosts would join him in the future. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. He wants to build a paradise that only he can rule. He must create mannequins for 24 spirits from the sealed class. It's quite an interesting task. It is necessary to use real people to sculpt, assemble, polish each bone, apply new paint to the skin, stitch up all the wounds. All this must be combined with delicate, flawless makeup and a soul that has nowhere to rest, and he can make his first living doll. There used to be a monster in the mirror, so he covered it with a black cloth. The protagonist became curious about the bloodstains and began removing the towel from the mirror. There was a door in front of him. The number 1 was written on it. The boy couldn't understand how the door in the mirror had returned. Not that. He couldn't understand what was happening. The boy froze in anticipation, after which he looked in the mirror and noticed that there was no bathroom door in the reflection. Could this really be because the monster had disappeared? The door glowed with a bright bloody light. Red rays seemed to be emanating from there. The protagonist became covered in beads of sweat. The door seemed to swing open on its own. It kept opening and he couldn't figure out why. The protagonist began to board up the door in various ways. He tried everything to keep it from opening, and so he hammered it shut again, and finally exhaled. Now the ghost won't be able to escape. But this countdown frightens him. If the number drops to 0, something bad will definitely happen. He needs to get stronger quickly and be prepared for it. Shawan asked the boss if he was there and said someone was looking for him. Chen Gei asked who it was and whether he'd said what he needed. The girl replied that he said his last name was Gao, and he brought a strange man here. The protagonist greeted the doctor. He explained that he was Gao Zhe's father. He asked if he remembered him. Chen Gei replied that of course he did. He thanked the man for helping him. He asked what had brought him here. The man explained that he had come across a unique patient whose symptoms were similar to those of the little boy, so he'd like to ask him a few questions. He introduced the student, Meng Nan, and said he'd come to him with his problem about 3 weeks ago. The system informed the protagonist that a special guest had arrived. The boy greeted him. The black phone gave him a clue. It seemed to be Dr. Gao. The man explained that Meng Nan was a cheerful, confident man, one of his best students. About 3 weeks ago, he started having the same recurring dream. Chen Ge asked the boy to tell him what the dream was that was bothering him. The boy began to explain that he dreamed he was washing his hair. Every time it's the same thing. Someone is looking at him while he's washing his hair. And the moment he closes his eyes, something pounces on him and tries to strangle him. Meng Nan was seriously scared. Wasn't it possible to go crazy after seeing something like that? The boy suddenly screamed to be let go. He imagined the spirit before him. He couldn't see the man standing nearby, but he was sure it was getting closer. For the past few weeks, he'd been having the same dream, and each night it grew clearer. He saw the man's face more and more clearly. Gao begged the boy to calm down, but he replied that he had had the same dream again the night before last, and that it was the last time. The man began to strangle him, and then he woke up and couldn't sleep anymore. Chen Gei thought it was best not to provoke him any further. Gao said he'd been to his rented apartment and inspected it completely from the inside. There's nothing strange about it. He'd like to ask the protagonist to help him with this matter. Maybe they'll find a clue. He's in poor condition now, and he's afraid he won't last long. Chen Gei replied that he helped him with Fang Yu, so he had no reason to refuse him. He asked when they were leaving. Gao replied that they were leaving today at 8 o'clock. They would be waiting for him at the Haimin residential complex. The protagonist saw some strange shapes. He not only saw them, but also felt them. He felt as if something was pressing on his neck. The system reported that the second special visitor had left. Thanks to his efforts, he had unlocked the mission information. The hidden mission trial room has been unlocked. You must arrive at the residential complex before midnight and determine the cause of a special visitor's illness. The mission's location is the Haimin residential complex. There's one clue. He came from the 3rd hospital ward. The boy recalled a conversation with Uncle Shu. He asked if he knew where his parents were. The man replied that he really didn't know where they were, but he'd heard them talking. The protagonist asked his uncle to try to remember what exactly they said. The man mentioned the 3rd section. He seemed to have vaguely heard them talking about the 3rd section. The mission's objective also mentioned this particular section. When he was sorting through his parents' things, Hu found a note labeled 3rd section. If he completes this task, he may receive information about the disappearance of his parents. This mission was very important, so he told Xiao Xiao that she would go with him. In front of us is the Haimin residential complex. The boy started knocking on the door. He told Meng Nan that it was him, Chen Gei. The boy knocked for a long time, but no one answered. He kept asking if Meng Nan was home. He knocked for a long time. Suddenly, someone opened the door and asked him not to knock. He asked who the boy was looking for. Chen Gei explained that Meng Nan, from room 303, was a student at Zhejiang Medical University. The guy who answered the door from the other apartment said he had the wrong address. He had no idea who Meng Nan was. Someone died in this apartment in the past, and since then, no one has lived there. That's why he asked not to knock so loudly. The protagonist was surprised that someone had died in this apartment. He caught his breath. Suddenly, the door swung open. It was Ming Nan. He exclaimed that the boy had arrived. The protagonist was seriously scared. He asked how the guy had gotten there if he wasn't answering him. Ming Nan asked him to come in and said he'd been waiting for him for a long time. Chen Gei explained that he'd been knocking on the door for a long time and thought he wasn't home. Chen Go noticed that the bathroom mirror faced the door. The mission had mentioned 3 people. What 3 people? Surely Meng Nan, the man in the dream, will be the 3rd person. He's probably hiding in the mirror. Meng Nan apologized and said he'd lived alone since childhood, so few people came to his house. Chen Gei asked where his parents were. The guy replied that they had been dead for a long time. Or rather, someone had killed them. When he was 6 years old, a thief entered the house and his parents told him to hide. By the time he was found the next day, his parents were long dead. Since then, he has suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder and enjoys washing his hair. He washes it several times a day. As soon as he feels even a drop of water on his head, he needs to wash it immediately. The protagonist thought about this and asked if they found him the next day. Where had he been hiding? Ming Nan replied that at night, when he noticed some movement, his parents told him to hide while they went to look. He heard a lot of noise from the next room and came out when the noise stopped. He saw a trail of blood leading into the bathroom. When he entered, he found no one there, and suddenly something fell from the ceiling onto his head. A drop of blood dripped onto his head. The boy remembered grabbing himself with his hands. It seems that this is why Meng Nan is upset and washes his hair every day. But the real threat is that someone who wants to hurt him appears in the dream. It definitely has to be connected to this house. There must be something here that's stumping Meng Nan. To discover the identity of the man in Meng Nan's dream and solve his problem, he needed to break into apartment 303. A guy in the next apartment opened the door and wanted to chat with him. He said he lives in apartment 301. Did he come with friends or just to look at the room? His friend probably lives in 304. He thinks he's crazy. Chen Gu replied that his friend was renting this apartment, so he wanted to rent the neighboring room, number 303. He asked what was wrong with it. Then the man asked if he knew the name of the first tenant of this apartment. His name was Wang Hai Ming, and this was his house. He was lucky enough to become wealthy. After this, he left his wife to marry another. But a few years later, she left him, taking his money and sent him to a mental hospital. In the end, it was his ex-wife who took pity on Wang Hai Ming and got him out of the hospital. He was fine during the day, but at night he would bang his head against the wall and scream. He said it felt like something was messing with his brain. After he died, several residents saw him here. Chen Gei asked if anyone had seen the dead man. The neighbor said that's exactly it. That's why he tells him it's a bad place. The protagonist assumed the key was room 303. Meng Nan opened the door and asked the boy what he was doing outside. The protagonist replied that, besides his room, he still needed to look around. He wanted to go to room 303 to explore it. The boy said the owner wouldn't let anyone in there. Chen Gei explained that he didn't need the owner. He'd climb in through the window. Then Meng Nan called him crazy. It was the 3rd floor. The boy asked him to make sure this was the fastest way. He hoped no one would find out about this. Otherwise, he'd be in trouble. Even if he explained it, no one would believe him anyway. The guy warned him to be careful because the floor below was concrete. Suddenly, the protagonist's phone rang. The boy decided it was the wrong time. He answered the phone, and it was Dr. Gao. He said there were a lot of problems at the hospital today, and he wouldn't be able to join him. Chen Go told the doctor that his call was indeed inopportune. He was climbing over the balcony. The doctor asked if he wasn't at Meng Nan's and which balcony he was climbing over. The protagonist replied that the source of Meng Nan's problems was in apartment 303. He wanted to inspect it before midnight to prevent any problems. And so the protagonist entered apartment 303 through the window. Wang Hai died in that room. He dedicated the flashlights and decided to search the entire apartment, and then he would think about the next step. Such a disgusting smell comes from these pair of sparrows. But how did they get here? This apartment has been empty for several years. But judging by their bodies, someone was here last week to hide this horror under their clothes. The boy started rummaging through his jacket and found some kind of key there. It seemed like it didn't belong to this apartment. He probably picked it up somewhere outside. But even if that's the case, why did he keep the key on him? Some guy yelled out the window for them to stop pushing him. They shouldn't push him to his death. Chen Gei couldn't understand why the guy from apartment 302 had said that. Only residents of 302 and 304 can get in here without using the front door. Meng Nan is a victim, so there's a high chance the dead sparrows ended up here due to the fault of a resident of 302. But why did he do it? Could he too have become possessed by the creature from apartment 303? After Wang Hai Ming's death, what he brought with him from the hospital likely remained in this room. That guy was talking to someone in the plural. Maybe there is more than one monster. Judging by the situation in apartment 303, the monster probably forced him to make blood sacrifices. Apparently they depend on it somehow. But it seems these victims aren't enough for these monsters, so their demands grew. Sometimes it was cats, sometimes stray dogs, or even people. It seems like the tenant of apartment 302 noticed him, so it's worth going back and checking on Meng Nan. The main character, looking at the guy, could not understand what had happened to him. Meng Nan stood in the middle of the room. He rolled his eyes and simply fell asleep standing up. At that moment, the guy looked like a sleepwalker. He walked like a sleepwalking zombie. But do sleepwalkers wash their hair in their sleep? The guy actually started turning on the water faucet. Then he put his head under the stream. Water began to flow down onto his head. Meng Nan screamed when he felt the drops. He begged them not to do this. Chengu approached the boy and began to wake him up, asking him to wake up quickly. The boy began to shake him. He begged him not to fall asleep, and began to wake him up as quickly as possible. Then Chenge sensed something. A black evil ghost appeared in the mirror. Is there really a monster in the mirror? He stood over Meng Nan and placed his hands on his neck. This monster is strangling the boy and trying to penetrate his body. The protagonist begins to solve this mystery. The glass shattered into tiny pieces. Chenge tried to stop the ghost. Meng Nan started screaming and begging to be let go. The boy tried to help him. The ghost was about to escape. He wouldn't let him. Chen Guo began calling his doll Xiao Xiao. He relied on her now, and he asked his assistant Xiao Xiao to do whatever she wanted with this ghost. The protagonist's ghost doll began to eat the second ghost. Chen Gei approached it. He noticed that she had grabbed him. The boy thanked his ghost. He was surprised that she ate it too. Why did she and Zhang Ya like this kind of food? A man with a sharp knife appeared behind the protagonist. He asked how he dared bite off his hand and threatened to kill him. It seemed the mirror monster had taken over his body. Chenge said that he was now in a physical body, so it would hurt even more. The man raised his cleaver over the protagonist's head and threatened to kill him. There was a powerful flash, and everything around was illuminated by a bright yellow-white light. The protagonist raised his bloody hammer as high as possible above the enemy's head. A sharp cleaver flew towards the boy. He managed to dodge it, and the knife hit the wall. Chengo started to approach the boy, but the boy asked him to wait. He sat on the floor, leaning against the wall. But suddenly he exclaimed that he would kill him. The second man ran up and told Xiao Du to stop. He called him crazy. The man asked him to stop quickly. The man asked the second guy what kind of dope he smoked at night, since he was acting like that. He fell on the guy, and the guy started coughing. He suddenly burst out and asked for an answer to his question. The guy began to beg to be killed. They couldn't understand what was happening. It was as if they had gone crazy. The protagonist couldn't figure out where the tube of scarlet light had come from. He looked toward the men. One of the guys the fat man fell on asked why he was feeling so bad. He asked the man why the TRT had landed on him. Then the man asked Xiao Du if he was back. The boy asked what was wrong with him. The man replied that everything was fine, just to call him the next time he decided to smoke. Xiao Du is trying to stab people. A neighbor said it was scary as hell. Xiao Du didn't understand what he was talking about. How could he slaughter people? What had happened to him seemed like a dream. Chen Gei said it was all over now. Could he tell me what he remembered from all this time? The guy replied that when he moved into this apartment 3 months ago, the landlady immediately warned him that if he felt uncomfortable or encountered anything strange, he could move out at any time. On the very first night, he had a nightmare and felt something strange. Half asleep, he saw a man. He had 2 faces, talking to himself and arguing, as if they were 2 different people. At first he didn't pay attention to it, but after this dream repeated itself several times, it kept getting closer and closer to him. Gradually, he began to become confused between sleep and reality. Be it day or night, this man haunted him. He told him that he would not be able to escape from him, and also promised that if he helped him, he would stop bothering him, and he believed him. He followed his orders to catch several small animals and leave them in apartment 303. By the next morning, all the animals were dead. There were no visible wounds on their bodies, so he had no idea what had killed them. He was afraid and wanted to run away. After all, his appetite was starting to grow. Soon, he began demanding that he lure a living person to apartment 303 after midnight. When he refused, he began to coerce him by threatening to kill him in his sleep. A few days later, he learned that Meng Nan was looking to rent an apartment. He recommended the Haiming apartment complex, and Meng Nan settled into apartment number 304. Chen Ge asked if he'd taken him straight to apartment number 303. The boy replied that he hadn't. Most often, the two faces argued with each other. One day, one of the faces said that if it weren't for his fear of the red ghost, he would rather die than share his existence with trash. The protagonist sensed the appearance of a red ghost. He wondered if the red ghost was coming from the third ward. Chen Ge said that the creature that had become attached to Haiming came from the third hospital ward, and it knew about the red ghost. Therefore, there's a high probability that the red ghost was inhabiting the third hospital ward. A ghost of the same level as Zhang Ya. It would be difficult. Xiaodu said that besides the red ghost, he also realized that they had several weaknesses. The monster rarely appeared at any time other than midnight. It was afraid of light and noisy environments. The most important thing is that, judging by his observations, for some reason he avoided cats. The protagonist found himself in front of a door. It was red. When the boy approached it and tried to open it, he couldn't understand why this door wouldn't open. He tried to pull the handle, but nothing worked. Then someone called his name. The boy broke out in beads of sweat. He turned toward the voice. Someone unknown kept calling him. When he opened his eyes, Dr. Gao was standing in front of him. It turned out it was a dream. The doctor approached him and said that he had finished his business and had come to see how he was doing. Mengnan has a high fever, so he needs to be taken to the hospital. He thinks Chen Ge should also get some rest at home. The boy agreed and asked Mengnan to be more careful. The boy thanked him for helping him that night. He turned his head towards him and said thank you. Beads of sweat were running down his face, apparently from weakness. The protagonist stepped outside and stopped in the middle of the road. A notification arrived that the one-star mission test had been successfully completed. Yin disciple, depending on the details, one can see the Yin god and the Yang Tenge. Other functions are unknown. The protagonist's expression suddenly changed. He noticed on his phone that he'd been given some more rewards. The player arrived at the mission site, discovered the cause of the victim's illness, and managed to survive until dawn. The mission was successfully completed. A new scenario has been unlocked. The player can freely manipulate props within the scenario using the interface accessible via the phone. The hidden element of this mission, the key to self-knowledge, has been unlocked. The key to self-knowledge is often the only one left capable of self-perception for the mentally ill. They can't say anything about their mental state, so they believe they are completely healthy, which leads them to refuse treatment. When they experience such symptoms, this key may help them for a while. Chen Ge realized that the hidden element of the mission was the key he'd found. What did those words about helping him mean? Or was he indirectly hinting at his mental health? He doesn't even know what this key can open. The phone beeped again. Tip for using the living puppet skill. Observe the area where the living puppet skill is used. Chen Ge approached the door and asked if anyone was there. The sign on the door read, Doll Workshop. The workshop's owner, Fat Liu, was sitting there. The boy asked the boss if he could make some dolls for him. He said hello and asked if he could make a custom doll. The man asked if this was for entertainment or personal use. Chen Ge laughed and replied that the puppet's appearance would likely be intimidating to their user. Fatty Liu replied that he was known throughout the region as the best doll maker. His dolls were even hard to distinguish from the real thing. That was just perfect. Chen Ge wanted to place an order for 24 dolls, similar to the people he showed. Fatty Liu explained that it would be a bit difficult. The head sculpture is very complex, so he'd need to find an artist. He asked the boy why he needed them. Chen Ge replied that he owned a haunted house. The guy offered to rent the space from his boss, and he would pay him daily. The man agreed, but he said they'd have to pay extra for the tools and raw materials. That's what they agreed on. The living puppet primary skill unlocked. The protagonist entered the workshop. He sat down at the table and began painting the dolls. The boy turned on the lamp to see better and got to work. And so the second day arrived. Fatty Liu began to approach his workshop and open the door. He thought that he didn't know what this guy could turn his studio into overnight. The man opened the door and was very surprised. He saw his mannequins and another face among them. There were a lot of them, much more than there had been before. Fatty Liu was even more surprised. Why were there so many heads here? The protagonist appeared and asked the man why he was sitting on the floor. The man replied that when he opened the door, he saw these heads, and they were all looking at him. Fatty Liu said he was scared to death. Did he really spend all night making them? Chen Ge asked if it really looked realistic. The man remarked that the boy was indeed modest. 24 heads, each with a distinct facial expression. Simply incredible quality. He would only waste his talent if he stayed in the haunted house. He truly was the best puppeteer he had ever seen. The man offered him a partnership. Just imagine the profits this promises. With his speed, they could easily break into the high-end market. Why is he so fixated on this haunted house? The protagonist apologized to the man and replied that he wasn't interested in making money. Besides, who said his haunted house wasn't making him much money? He asked to finish with the bodies quickly, as he wanted to start using them as soon as possible. Fat Lee asked him to call when he'd thought it over. When the boy went outside, Xiaowan approached him. She asked what was inside. His suitcase looked very heavy. Chen Gei replied that it was filled with doll heads. She shouldn't open them, as she might get scared. The girl replied that it was never scary to hit someone. And weren't they just dolls? Chen Gei explained that they were a staple of the Mu Yan middle school scene. Xiaowan was surprised by the new props and said that now even more people will be scared by their haunted house. The third chamber mentioned in the recent mission must be somehow connected to his parents' disappearance. Xiaowan noticed that the suitcases were indeed heavy. Chen Gei thought he absolutely had to get there. Suddenly a guy called out to him and said he'd finally found it. The guy introduced himself as Liu Dao. He was a devoted fan and never missed a single one of his broadcasts. They were too good. When Qin Guang copied the content, he was the one who exposed the plagiarism. The protagonist thought he was most likely Qin Guang's rival. He had come here to collaborate with him. The boy thanked him and asked why he had come looking for him. Liu Dao replied that he wanted to eradicate plagiarism. They'll find them places that look scary and abandoned and prepare everything they need there. They'll devise some scary surprises, and he'll just conduct his live broadcast. And he can arrange some advertising from their studio for the live broadcast. He promises to promote it using the best resources on all platforms. They won't give Qin Guang a chance to plagiarize. The protagonist asked if he thought he could beat Qin Guang. Chen Gei replied that none of these sets were interesting, and the scenarios were predictable. He asked about his recommendation. Liu Dao then asked what he had to offer. The boy remembered the hospital's third ward for the mentally ill. He said he planned to go there during his next broadcast. The disappearance of the hospital director and patients, according to an anonymous letter, bodies were left in the hospital. Various bloody messages appeared. Groans came from closed rooms. Someone opens locked rooms at midnight. What did they see if they went mad overnight? Who is the patient and who is the doctor? Screams, incisions, the position of stitches, and the perversions of human nature. The hospital where the sun never rises. The guy told Chen Gei that their studio might not be brave enough to go to the location he'd chosen. They could edit the script. Chen Gei replied that everything was fine and he didn't need people to follow him. He wanted to go there alone. The guy was surprised he really planned to be alone in this place after midnight. The protagonist asked if there were any problems with that. The guy replied that of course not, and asked that if he had any demands, he should name them and he would fulfill them. The protagonist noticed it had started raining again. He overheard someone talking about his courier coming from the haunted house. Someone said we should ask Uncle Shu for help. He couldn't handle this alone. Someone else mentioned to their father that their younger brother had been scratched by a stray cat. Chen Gei listened thoughtfully. A man asked his child not to cry and promised to help. He asked if it was this cat that scratched him. The man exclaimed that he would skin her. The cat stood before them, ready to attack. But she was protecting her kittens, who were sitting in a box. The man raised a shovel over the cat and asked the animal to say goodbye to its life. He raised her as high as he could to strike. But suddenly the protagonist appeared and stopped him. The man asked what he was doing. He told him to get lost and not interfere. Chen Gei told the boy to calm down. They could discuss everything. His child was practically unharmed. The man asked what he meant, or whether this cat's life was more important than his son's. He raised a shovel over the main character's head and asked him to get lost, or he would get it too. Then the boy grabbed him by the throat and began to push him away. The man began to cough. The protagonist knocked him to the floor, but the boy continued to cough. Chen Gei looked at him intently and said that he asked him to forget about it. Did he understand him? He looked intently into his eyes, waiting for an answer. The man thought the boy's gaze was frightening him. His body froze. He couldn't even move. Then the boy, frightened, asked his brother to wait and talk it over. He explained that there were surveillance cameras everywhere. A stray cat isn't worth it. He grabbed his head and started running. Chen Gei approached the cat and her kittens. They began to meow sweetly as they looked at him. But the cat was preparing to attack again. The boy thought that under normal circumstances, wouldn't an armed man resist? Why did he give in so easily? When he grabbed it, there was a coldness in its eyes. The cat kept meowing. It must have been a yin-yang vision. The boy stood in front of the box of animals, looking at them. He acted almost instinctively. likely due to the cumulative stress of all the recent events. It seemed that yin-yang awareness gradually developed, but what properties did it acquire after evolution? The protagonist walked down the street and suddenly stopped. He heard a slapping sound. A cat lay under his umbrella near the box. The kittens meowed in fear. The boy looked in their direction. Then he sighed with relief. He approached the veterinary clinic, but the girl apologized and said they were closed and to come back tomorrow. Chen Gei explained that the cat couldn't wait until tomorrow. The vet said it looked like the wounds were left by a person after she injured him. The kittens couldn't be saved. If he took the cat with him, he'd bury them there. The protagonist agreed. The boy was thinking about what the young man from apartment 302 in the Haimin residential complex had said about the mirror monster being afraid of cats. Ordinary animals feared him and bared their teeth because of Zhang Ya. But this cat isn't afraid of him. This stray cat can still spring surprises on him. Chenga took the cat onto his shoulder and told her that from now on, this would be her home. The animal looked into the boy's eyes. Her eyes were different colors. The main character explained to the cat that first they would bury her children, and so he found a shovel and chose a specific place to bury the kittens. He said that they would bury them near the house so that she could come to them at any time. Since he's decided to take her in, he needs to think of a name for her. They met at night in the rain so he can call her Night Rain. The cat turned away. Then the boy suggested calling her Snowflake and she got angry again. He called her Milk Rice, but she remained angry. Chengo told the cat that she didn't look like a cat at all, but more like a tiger. What if he called her a white tigress? If she behaved well, he promised to give her some dried fish. The cat meowed contentedly in response. Chenga collected 24 dolls and dressed them in school uniforms. He then dragged them into the Muyan Middle School setting. He noticed that dressed up, they truly did look like real people. Muyan Middle School's hidden mission had been completed. The dolls for the 24 spirits from the sealed classroom are ready. The system congratulated the returnees on receiving their reward for their goodwill mission. Once the spirits leave the scenario, they may go mad. The boy exclaimed that all of Muyan Middle School's hidden missions had been completed. The 2-star scenario could be officially opened. He couldn't let just anyone into Muyan Middle School. If these spirits get out of control, they could scare people to death. Muyan's high school scenario could help him make his haunted house famous. Its goal is not to create a scary haunted house, but an entire interactive amusement park. A theme park of horror and fear. His cat, White Tigress, meowed. She shifted her gaze elsewhere. The protagonist noticed how she suddenly ran forward and asked where she was running. Could something have happened? What could she have found? The cat began scratching with her paw, but she didn't stop meowing. Under the table lay the ghost doll, Xiao Xiao. She grabbed the doll by the handle. Chen Gei explained to the cat that it was their friend and asked her not to harm it. Xiao Xiao was, at the very least, an ominous ghost. But she was completely ignored by the cat. The boy asked if she had found anything else. The cat began meowing and purring. She chose a direction, namely, toward the bathroom on the first floor, where the mirror was. The cat approached the toilet door. Chen Gei knew she would go there. It's midnight now, and the cat has reacted very strongly to this room and the mirror in it. When the boy went inside, he noticed that blood was seeping from the mirror. The numbers returned again, and the countdown began again. Chen Gei stared intently at his reflection. The door in the mirror shook, as if something were pushing it from the other side. Streams of scarlet light began to emerge from the door. It was a terrible, bloody world. Chen Gei stood in front of the door, watching it. An ominous red shadow appeared there, as if hands were reaching forward. A scarlet red haze all around and a multitude of hands. He couldn't understand what was happening. These hands began to pull the boy into the mirror. There was definitely someone behind the door. It's trying to drag him into the mirror. The protagonist clenches his teeth as hard as he can. He exclaimed that he wouldn't give in so easily. Chen Gei began to resist with all his might, trying to break free from the ghost's clutches. Chen Gei continued to struggle against the ghost that was pulling him into the mirror. He couldn't get rid of it. Suddenly, the cat he'd adopted began to meow. She spread her claws and rushed toward the mirror. The animal's eyes were red. She rushed forward. The cat caught up with the ghost and grabbed his hand. There was a lot of scarlet red blood around. The boy kept screaming. The mirror kept pulling him in. The fight continued. The protagonist could not give up. He somehow managed to escape the mirror, then sighed with relief. He flew off and fell to the floor. Chen Ge couldn't stop coughing. Everything around him was upside down. Sweat ran down the boy's face. He began to wipe himself with his hand and thought about how close it was. He almost pulled it in. Didn't he figure out the ghost in the mirror? Why was that door open? As he was being pulled in, He saw a blood-red world in the mirror. Could it be that there was another world in the mirror? And the ghost that Zhang Ya ate was just a monster from that world. This mirror can connect two worlds, and they just wanted to drag him into that world. The cat sat down next to the boy and began meowing. Chenge told her that if it weren't for her, he might have ended up in another world. It seems the countdown is only activated when the doors opened. The monster, on the other hand, must have some reason for coming to this world. Now the numbers only disappear after midnight. Everything should be calm now. The boy told the cat that she could rest now, and that he would feed her in the evening. The cat began to purr. Chenju decided to check other locations. At the end of the corridor was an intersection with 3 more exits. In front of him were apartments with different numbers, starting with 302. With these expansions, he thinks the entire parking lot will soon be filled with his gruesome scenes. He thinks Labyrinth of Horror would be a fitting title. The next scenario might be the 3rd chamber. It's also connected to his parents' disappearance, and he needs to be well prepared. In front of us was a farmer's market. Vendors were selling various goods to people. One of them said that pig hooves, ears, and tails were selling for less. He asked the boy what he wanted. Chenge replied that he wanted to buy his butcher's knife. He then asked how many pigs he had killed. The man explained that he couldn't sell that one. But his grandfather was a butcher and planned to take the knife with him to the grave, declaring he wouldn't allow his children to follow in his footsteps. However, his stubborn father insisted on keeping the knife for himself. Since then, bad luck has dogged them. The knife is cursed, so he won't ask much for it. The 100 and he is his. Chengo noticed that this knife was cool. It looked very impressive. This knife is truly extraordinary. He senses its energy. The man explained that when he was little, he'd seen his grandfather enter the pigsty with this knife. Not a single animal dared make a sound. Chenge had bought it immediately. The system announced that the lucky patrons were ghosts, and congratulated me on winning 2 lucky roulette spins. Chen Gu exclaimed that he couldn't be such a loser as to win the evil ghost twice in a row. But what was that? Chenga was congratulated on receiving a unique piece of white Valentine's Day candy. A sweet taste danced on his tongue. When he ate it, Zhang Ya would appear. He received the gift that Zhang Ya couldn't give when she was still alive. Zhang Ya's affection grew slightly. The boy realized that he had received the gift that Zhang Ya couldn't give when she was still alive. This sounds very strange. This face resembles one of Zhang Ya's acquaintances. Just don't let them say she turned one of her acquaintances into candy. From a probability standpoint, it was time to get something good. The system congratulated him on receiving the rare crying ribbon item. When he first listened to the tape, he realized something was wrong. The blank tape contained only white noise, impossible to erase. He tried every possible means to remove it. But eventually, he heard strange sounds that heralded his death. The boy had won another sinister ghost. There was a cassette tape in front of him, and Chenge wondered who used them these days. It would be hard to find a record player, even in a landfill. The probability of receiving it is low. This means that this ghost on the film must be slightly weaker than Zhang Ya. If it is weaker, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It would be easier for him to negotiate with him. A knife, salt, a lighter, and a flashlight. It seemed he had taken everything. But suddenly, the boy remembered there was something else. He called upon the spirit of the pen and said he wanted to take advantage of today's fortune-telling opportunity. Therefore, he asked for help answering a question. Can he tell what danger awaits him in the 3rd hospital ward? The boy took the pen in his hands and placed it on the sheet of paper. The pen began to write something. She wrote that certain death awaited him. Reading this inscription, he became thoughtful. The protagonist told the pen that he hoped it was wrong. Otherwise, the end awaits them all. Chen Gei put the pen back in his pocket. The system congratulated him on the opening of the 3rd hospital ward test mission. The boy decided that after he completed this mission, he would be able to find even more clues about his parents. It would be interesting to see what he could find there. The boy walked outside. A man called out to him. Turning to look at him, he looked up in surprise, seeing the cat on Chen Gei's shoulder. The protagonist explained that this was his new friend. What a sensation it would be when a white cat appeared on air. The friend laughed and replied that he trusted him. Qinguang's live broadcast starts at 10 o'clock this evening, so they'll have to try hard to beat them. Chen Gei asked where he'll be broadcasting this time. The guy replied that it was Muyan Middle School, where he'd been last time. Only this time, he decided not to copy it, but hired a screenwriter to develop the script. That way, they wouldn't be able to accuse him of plagiarism, and he'd get away with it. Chen Ge asked what he was proposing. The boy laughed and suggested they ignore him. They were almost ready so they could start anytime. Another man asked Old Man Lou if he was sure this guy could handle it. They sacrificed slots for 2 other streamers, each of whom averaged 100,000 viewers. They were only able to organize a second-level advertisement. The guy replied that Chen-ge possessed a unique charm. His understanding of fear was different from most. The protagonist asked his friend not to worry, and tried to reassure him that everything would be fine. The friend replied that he had collected some information, and asked him to see if anything caught his eye. The hospital has only 3 buildings, all connected. The first and second buildings housed regular patients, and their entrances and windows faced the sunny side. But the third building is the most mysterious. It was the quarantine zone. The most dangerous patients were housed here, and the windows and doors were hidden from the sun. A friend advised him to be extremely careful when visiting Ward 3. According to the artist's description, regular patients were forbidden from visiting Ward 3. Chenga asked why this third hospital ward was so special, or if they'd managed to find any additional information about this building. A friend replied that some of this seemed to be made up. Some people claim that a doctor was murdered there at one point, and the patient's identity was only revealed a few days later. Some even say it's not people living there, but strange creatures. That must be a lie. The protagonist replied that they needed to check the camera because they were running out of time. It's important to remember that they need to stay in the tent. They shouldn't rush off to look for him, no matter what they see or hear. And so the boy approached some building. He thought that he had found this place. And so the live broadcast began. The protagonist greeted everyone. He explained that as day turns to night, strange sounds begin to come from the hospital. Words written in blood appear in the hallways. The entire center occupies a large area, consisting of 3 buildings in total. He suggested we take a look at the first one. The door creaked softly. The lock was broken, clearly forced open. My parents talked about the third hospital ward right before they disappeared. But why did they think this place was so special? The wards here are crowded and cramped. Living in such a place can gradually lead to losing hope of survival. The boy was wandering around the room and then noticed some writing on the wall in the corner. The handwriting was different, so it wasn't written by the same person. But he can't make out what's written here. When some patients become violent, they begin to mumble something unintelligible, as if talking in their sleep. It feels like a ghost from the mirror has put his hand here. Perhaps he'll find a passage to another world in the third building. The protagonist thought that it was something like a nurse's station in front of him. It's an iron cage. Perhaps these cages were used to keep animals. They began to come closer. The duck is half-baked. The feathers aren't plucked. It doesn't look like it's been eaten by humans. Why are there 2 bowls in the cage? There were probably 2 dogs in that cage. The boy picked up a cup and noticed that one was filled with water, while the other had a strong odor. It smelled like rat poison. There were signs on the cage, too. Maybe this cage wasn't for animals, but for people. There's clearly someone else here besides him. Someone lives in this hospital, abandoned 5 years ago, and they're not alone. The protagonist and his cat moved on. The boy decided to find this man. When he approached the main door, it was closed. Who could close the front door? He remembered leaving it open when he came in. Suddenly, the cat stopped and began to growl. She looked menacingly upward. The protagonist wondered what could have happened. The cat was peering into the stairwell. There was some kind of monster man there. What could it be? The boy began to peer closer. He couldn't tell if it was a person. The cat began to hiss, after which she picked up speed and ran off somewhere. Chen-ge asked her where she was going. He took his huge iron hammer in his hands and asked the cat to wait and not run away. But he lost her. The man's face seemed asymmetrical to him, but was it really a man? He locked the door and wanted to lure him into a trap. At least he figured out that this strange guy lived here. It's important to remember that the center consists of 3 buildings, and the first has an exit into the second. Chen-ge wandered down the corridor and then entered a hall. This hall resembled a funeral hall. There was a portrait of someone on the wall. Maybe it was the nurse who became a victim in the third hospital ward. It feels like the portrait is looking at him. Why did they make a funeral parlor in the hospital? And so the boy approached the door with the sign. It was the second hospital ward. He asked the white tigress what she was doing there, but the sound was completely different from the white tigress. The boy began to enter some hall. A large cage stood before him again. He came closer. A girl was sitting in the cage, but she was all chained up and gagged. Chen-ge rested his hammer on his shoulder. He realized that these cages were for people. There were 3 victims in them, a woman in the middle cage and men on either side. Chen-ji asked how long they'd been locked in here. The old man silently licked his fingers, as if trying to recall the taste of the food he'd just eaten. The boy said he couldn't just let them out. There might be a killer among them, and it would be too dangerous. He asked why they were locked in here. He noticed that this man was the calmest and the most suspicious. 3 cages, but only the woman is bound and gagged. Something's clearly wrong here. She's hard to control, which is probably why she's bound. Then why don't the others ask for help? Why do they just sit and watch him? The boy approached the girl and asked her not to worry. He was here to save her. But one of the men advised him not to remove her gag because she was very noisy. He could tell, but in exchange he hoped he wouldn't remove the woman's gag. Chen-gyu asked the man to first tell him who he was. The man replied that he was a local patient, Wang Haiming. Chen-ge closed his eyes and lowered his head. He raised his huge hammer and struck the bars of the cage with all his might. He exclaimed that if the man lied again, he would hit him over the head with it. Then he replied that his name was Shu Tong. Patient number 5. His name is Shu Tong. He suffers from Fragoli syndrome. He believes everyone around him is the same person, and that he lives in a world of illusions. The boy asked if he knew Wang Haiming. The man replied that he did. He attacked the medical staff, and the doctor tied him up and sent him to a cell in Ward 3. His family later took him in, but he died outside the hospital. Chen-gu wondered if he could trust his words. He asked him to tell him something about the old man. Why he had 2 plastic bowls in his cage. The man replied that his son had placed them there, as a form of retribution. 1 bowl with clean water, the other with poison. Life or death, it all depends on luck. The boy asked why his son was acting like this. The man explained that the old man's body was bad, but his character was even worse. After his wife left, he was left home alone, his life entirely dependent on his son. His son was a doctor, and although his salary wasn't high, it was enough for both of them. Rumor has it that prolonged contact with the mentally ill drove the son insane. He ended up injuring several of his patients. He was fired from his job and admitted here as a patient. The father found a new wife and left him. When the hospital closed and his wife left him, he took his son and put him in a cage, then placed 2 bowls in front of him. And he did everything his son does to him now. Chen-ge thought this story perfectly fit one of the patients in Ward 3. Patient number 8 suffered from spatial neglect and was locked in Ward 3. He was described as extremely dangerous. Xiongqing was once a psychiatrist. His intellect was higher than most, so even as a psychopath, he was special. He might be the killer hiding in the mental hospital. The enemy has the geographical advantage, so it will be difficult. The protagonist asked how he knew this old man's story so well. Perhaps he was his son. The man exclaimed that he knew he wouldn't believe him. They never trusted him, and he didn't trust them. The man asked them to leave him alone. He hid here, but they still found him. He asked them to stop following him. Chen-ge thought he was beyond saving. Why did all the patients from Ward 3 return to this place? Perhaps they're drawn to something, or perhaps they're all under the control of ghosts, which is why they were forced to return. He decided to find out. The man tried to stop him, saying he'd promised not to remove the girl's gag if he answered his questions. Chen-ge begged him to shut up, saying the man had lied to him first. The man exclaimed that he wasn't lying, they all were. The boy began to remove the gag from the girl's mouth and said he didn't intend to harm her. When he took the gag out of her mouth, the girl started screaming. She said the word hand, and she began to scream the word hand over and over again. Her eyes were somehow crazy. The man grabbed his head and cried out that it was all over. They were already coming and they were all going to die. The girl continued to shout the word hand. 2 shadows began running down the corridor. They rustled their huge axes across the floor, producing a very unpleasant, menacing sound. 2 terrifying male monsters approached the cages. One of them was missing an arm. The girl in the cage started screaming again. The word hand was constantly on her lips. The protagonist gagged her again and decided she was crazy too. He asked her to calm down, as he wouldn't touch her. All he needed was for her to answer his questions. Chen-ge asked her to simply nod her head, and that was it. Had she seen many hands, and was she afraid of them? Patient number 4 lost his arm in an accident. He was subsequently diagnosed with a phantom limb because he believed his arm was still there. The boy asked her if she'd seen a man with 1 arm. Did he have a weapon? What was he carrying? A saw, a knife, or an axe? He again asked her not to be afraid. If she was truly innocent, he would save her. He had come here today to uncover all the secrets and ensure that all the madmen were punished by the law. What a painful experience she had to go through to suffer so much. The men in the cages started clutching their heads. One of them screamed that it was all over and that it was his fault. They had been drawn to this crazy woman. He screamed that they would all die. Chen-ge turned to him and asked if he was sure that they would die. If he comes here, then he'll introduce him to his hammer, and they'll see who dies. Two men with axes in their hands walked down the corridor. They were getting closer and closer. Someone's hand reached for the door. They had already reached the main entrance. Chen-ge stood behind the door, hoisting his enormous heavy hammer onto his shoulder. One of the men was already nearby. The protagonist realized that the real criminal had already arrived and was ready to strike. The boy jumped out and tried to hit the man, but he managed to deftly dodge. The eyes of this evil ghost man changed color, glowing with an eerie radiance, after which the man flew back and landed on the cold, hard floor. Chen-ge asked him, regardless of whether he was a human or a ghost, to defeat him first. Let him take his other hand and see what else he can do. Chen-ge kicked the man in the head. The protagonist came closer to him and apologized, saying that it was too hard. He wanted to ask a couple of questions, but apparently not all at once. The guy held his foot on the man's head. A second man appeared behind him holding a shovel. Chen-ge said that one-on-one combat was much fairer. He asked the man what he thought about it. When the boy looked at him, he saw an ugly, distorted face. The man with the shovel turned sharply and ran for the exit. The shovel fell to the floor with a clang. Chen-ge realized he was scared. He looked quite terrifying. He was probably unconscious. Suddenly, Liu Dao contacted the boy. He asked to speak to Chen-ge. The boy replied that he always chose the right time. Liu Dao explained that he was doing a great job and that the broadcast popularity had exceeded 150,000 views. The broadcast was already becoming difficult to control. Meanwhile, Chen-ge began tying up the man with one arm. Liu Dao said he takes a hammer and runs after monsters, even people locked in cages. He walks on the edge of a blade. He's about to lose control. But they've already finished and called the police, so he can go out. The protagonist laughed and replied that no matter what, they had defeated Qin Guang. How could he leave now? The young man thanked everyone in the audience for their efforts. This evening had also brought him many surprises. But this wasn't the end, and he would show them something no one could replicate. It's time to move on to the third section. The key to his parents' disappearance may lie there. The protagonist began to walk toward danger, never letting go of his huge, heavy hammer. The boy wondered what kind of chilling wind was enveloping this place. And what else was ahead? Chen-ge came closer. He couldn't tell if these were dolls or what. These dolls were made from pillows. They looked like mogul bags. One of them had Zhang Qisi's inscription on it. Even though they are not made very well, for some reason they cause him great anxiety. Coming closer, the boy noticed that each doll had a name. That is, they represented real people. He reached out to one of them. The protagonist decided to sprinkle salt on the dolls to prevent them from coming to life. He needs to be more frugal with his last packet of salt. He can't be so wasteful anymore. Another nurse's station appeared in front of him. He hoped there wouldn't be any cages here. Oddly enough, all the journals, notes, and medications are neatly laid out, and the counter is spotlessly clean, as if it had recently been used. The boy approached some papers. One of them had names written on it. Hadn't he seen those names on dolls? Someone comes here every night to give medicine to the dolls. Who could do something like that? The person who prescribed the medicine must still be nearby. He probably didn't go very far and is now wandering around somewhere nearby. The names on the bags were recently written, but they were probably just signed. But who could do such a thing at night? Or was he forcibly feeding his victims narcotics? But why do we need dolls? All the patients in the third department died, so maybe that's why they were replaced with dolls. The protagonist couldn't understand why everything was so confusing. Then he heard some creaking and knocking. What could it be? It doesn't make a single sound while it's walking. What kind of patient was this? His face was distorted, and it looked like he was a woman. The main character remembered the photograph that hung in the first room. Could it really be her? He wondered if this woman was dead. Even after death, she still wanders the hospital, like a puppet still tending to the patients. Chen-ge stood behind the wall, watching her, putting the puzzle pieces together to complete the picture. The psychiatric hospital had been abandoned for 5 years, but the third hospital ward continued to function. The patient simply transformed from living to dead. All these changes could be connected to this mysterious door. Could it be that because the door had been left open for so long, the world outside the door and the real world had already begun to overlap? The protagonist continued walking down the corridor. He couldn't figure out where the door itself was. The director's office stood before him. He wondered why, of all the buildings, this office was located here. The boy walked as close as he could and then opened the door. He stood in the doorway looking ahead. Chen-ge approached one of the boxes. He noticed it had a seal. So the police were looking for something here. He picked up a piece of paper with notes about Men Nan on it. The boy from Ward 3 is acting up again. He was the first to see the door, so he suspects the door's appearance is connected to him. But wasn't Ward 3 empty? Where did the child come from? He looks a lot like Men Nan, and his mother is probably nearby. The protagonist realized that his mother was ill, so he was born here, in the third section. Men Nan was the most amazing child he'd ever seen. He was different from other people in so many ways, and sometimes it seemed he saw things others couldn't. After the birth, his mother went crazy and was locked in Ward 3, so the boy grew up without a mother. He was withdrawn and often talked to himself. After testing, they diagnosed him with schizophrenia, so it turns out he was already ill as a child. But that's not surprising at all. After all, he was born and raised in a psychiatric hospital. Anyone would have gone crazy there. But when the child saw his mother, the first thing he said wasn't "Mom," but the door. The boy pointed at the door, apparently telling them he wanted to get closer to it. No one had taught him that word before. When the child learned to walk, he sometimes approached the third room on his own and looked at the door, which was several times taller than him. This door is exactly the same as the door that was in the mirror of his house. Why was Men Nan able to communicate with ghosts as a child, but as an adult he couldn't even cope with the ghost in the mirror? The door appears at exactly midnight. It remains for a minute before disappearing. He sealed off the third hospital ward and forbade anyone from approaching the third room at night. He asked the nurses on night duty to monitor the bleeding door. Fresh blood seeped through the door, staining it red. It was like a wall from a nightmare. He asked everyone to watch the entrance to the third ward. At midnight on the third day, everyone heard the door open. He tried every method he could think of, but he couldn't stop it. Chen Gei wondered if Men Nan could have been the cause of the door's appearance. It looks like he'll need Mengnan's help to unlock the door to his haunted house. He's the key to unlocking it. As the protagonist held the paper in his hands, the door behind him suddenly creaked. This is a nurse's uniform. Apparently, she's looking for her journal. The monster woman walked in, growling menacingly. She began to approach the boy, flashing her wild eyes. The monster woman approached faster and faster, ready to attack the protagonist. But the boy, without thinking twice, took out his powerful axe and raised it over the woman's head. With one heavy blow, he pushed her away and she fell backwards with all her might, breaking the stone table. The dead nurse monster began to rise to her feet again. She cast an angry glance at the boy. The protagonist exclaimed that she was finished. He raised his hammer over her head again. Without thinking, the boy dealt her a heavy blow to the head. The monster woman continued to growl. The main character decided to use a knife that he had just recently acquired. This pig knife was just right for a monster woman. He set his hammer aside, and grabbing a sharp, huge cleaver, he began to approach the enemy. But what fury she had! She bit down hard on the hammer, which he hadn't had time to put down. The boy asked her if he had offended her in any way. He started waving the knife, after which he cut her into pieces. The monster woman began to scream and fall backwards. She flew far away and fell to the floor. Her teeth were clenched tightly and gnashed loudly throughout the room. She began to dissolve like a ghost that was there and suddenly disappeared. Chen Go stood over the ghost's clothes, thinking it was all over. Then the boy's phone rang. His friend exclaimed that it was a success, and the number of viewers had reached 300,000. Chen Go asked about Qin Guang. He replied that after entering the classroom at Muyang Middle School, his video feed suddenly turned to black. Viewers went searching for similar content and stumbled upon him. Most viewers came to his channel and never left. For a professional studio, even 5 minutes of downtime is a tragedy. This can only mean one thing. Something has happened to his team, as they've been down for over 30 minutes. Chenga replied that he had warned Qin Guang, but he had refused to listen, so he couldn't be blamed. He hoped he would recover quickly and think twice before plagiarizing someone else's content next time. Today, Muyan School is not so dangerous, and the ghosts there are not evil, so everything should be fine. Now the boy decided to continue. He must find this door that leads to new adventures. The main character noticed that there was a red mist in front of him like blood. There was a no-entry sign in front of him. He walked on, looking ahead. The boy realized that it was this door that had destroyed the hospital. The red fog was everywhere. Chengyu wondered if something similar would happen in his haunted house if he left her. Then someone's footsteps were heard. Someone growled angrily not far from the boy, approaching him. It was a monster woman, as if she had come to life. The protagonist decided she had been resurrected. But how could that be? She crumbled to dust. Perhaps it has something to do with this place. The boy exclaimed that her mouth smelled bad and asked her not to open her mouth anymore. And he thought that if he didn't deal with her now, he would have big problems. Was the door opening? It seemed like something was definitely about to come out. Hands began to appear through the red haze. The main character began to look closely and decided that this creature was coming towards him. The ghost woman was getting closer and closer. The boy realized he was trapped. He gripped his huge metal hammer in his hands and gritted his teeth as he prepared to attack. He raised his hammer and at full speed struck the body of the female monster with it. She flew back a little towards the open door, where some new monster was located. Chen-ge felt like the monster woman had taken a liking to another monster. It began to pull her in. The monster extended its hand from the red shroud. It began to pull the monster woman harder and harder. She couldn't do anything about it. The monster woman tried to break free, but it was no use. A multitude of hands grabbed her. They held her by the body, head, and legs, and kept pulling her into the room. The monster woman began to scream. Then the monster grabbed her face with its terrifying paws. The protagonist decided it didn't belong here. He kicked the door shut. The boy helped the monster and pushed the female monster inside. When she flew into the room, the boy quickly grabbed the door and pushed it. And finally, he closed the heavy door firmly. What kind of monster was this, and why was it so strong? The boy crouched down in front of the door and thought that he needed to close it somehow, at least temporarily. If it doesn't work out, he's afraid he won't live to see dawn. He hopes it will hold him off while he searches for a way to close it. The protagonist began calling Dr. Gao, hoping the man would pick up. It seemed he'd need Mengnan's help to solve the door in his haunted house. When the doctor answered, he asked for Mengnan. He had an emergency. The man explained that he was still in the hospital and what he needed from him. The boy explained briefly. Dr. Gao replied that he was on his way to the hospital and would be there in 20 minutes. He asked him not to hang up and to let me know if he needed anything. Meanwhile, behind the boy, behind the open door, there was a man with a gun. Behind him was a monster, growling menacingly, its huge, sharp fangs flashing. Chen-gu realized he couldn't wait those 20 minutes. The monster had already grabbed the man and was dragging him somewhere. This guy heard the nurse's screams and came here. He can't use the hammer. What should he do? The protagonist came closer and thought that he didn't really want to cut a person with a knife. The monster ran after the man, never ceasing to hold him and growling viciously. The boy couldn't figure out what it was sitting on his shoulder. The monster invited the boy to play some kind of game. The monster controls him and uses him to communicate. He said that if the guy wins, he'll let him go. But if he loses, he'll give him his body. The game is called Whoever Talks First. Chen-ge thought it was a game in which the player was doomed to lose because there was no time limit. The boy agreed, but said he'd have to adjust the rules. The monster exclaimed that he couldn't deceive him. It would be better if he killed him for him. Chen-ge thought that he must have some weak points. When he tries to attack him, he can only move his upper body, while his lower body is still attached to his distorted face. This means he can't easily move his lower body. If he could simply jump on his victim's shoulders, he wouldn't have to lure them in under the pretext of a game. Therefore, when it moves from one body to another, it is probably at its weakest. The monster did not let go of its victim, enveloping the man in its tentacles. The protagonist asked the monster to wait. He exclaimed that he agreed to play this game with him. Before the game started, he asked the boy to throw away his knife. Chen-ge listened to the monster and the cold weapon flew to the floor with a ringing sound. The boy raised his hands and said he agreed to play without a knife. He asked what he should do next. The monster asked me to simply stand still. From that moment on, no matter what he saw or heard, he was not allowed to make a sound. If he makes any sound, he will lose immediately. The monster began to writhe around the boy and hiss angrily. He extended his long, terrifying tongue. The monster's eyes glowed bright red as it approached the protagonist. The boy decided he really did look scary. That's why everyone lost to him. He hopes he can hurt him. Chen-ge grabbed the pen in his pocket with one hand. The monster noticed that the boy was still silent. Then how about something more exciting? When the monster turned its back on him, the boy decided that this was his only chance. He raised his hand, holding his pen in it, and exclaimed that this was his answer. He forced him to eat ink. The spirit of the pen was supposed to come to the boy's aid, but without thinking twice, he plunged the pen into the terrifying monster's eye. Blood immediately spurted from its face. Chen-ji flew up into the air and the monster shouted at him to kill the man. The main character grabbed the knife that was lying on the floor. He nimbly flew up to the monster and swung his knife. He was already close to it. The monster didn't expect such dexterity from the boy. With a sharp movement, Chen-ge cut the monster's body in half. The monster called him a liar. He asked the man to help him get rid of it. Suddenly, two men appeared with sharp, bladed weapons in their hands. The boy realized it was Shu Tong and the one-armed man. For him, this was a very bad sign. It seems that all the patients in the 3rd hospital ward are possessed by monsters. One of the men asked him not to be afraid. He said that soon the boy would become one of them. Chen-ge realized this was already very bad. They had blocked his escape route, their movements precise and coordinated. It seemed the 3-star script was still too complex for him. The protagonist became wary. He took the candy the ghost had given him and decided it was his last trump card. He took a candy from his pocket and began to summon the ghost of Zhang Ya. The girl was already behind him. Her hair flew around. The protagonist began to unwrap the candy wrapper, taking out the candy. The monster girl began to eat this sweet, after which she rose as high as possible. Chen-go asked the ghost girl to help him. The men were already running towards the protagonist. Then Zhang Ya turned towards her opponents and began to fly towards them faster and faster. She reached out her hand to one of the monsters and blood spattered all over the area. The protagonist decided that this was very cruel. The difference in strength was enormous. He can't help her. His huge hammer is still propping the door open. Blood has started to spread across the walls. He needs to lock it quickly. Finally, the protagonist received a call from Dr. Gao. The boy answered immediately. It came from the hospital room. It was Meng Nan, thanking the boy for his help last time. Chen Gei asked to skip the formalities. He knows his childhood self is hiding in his mind. He needs to know how to awaken it. The boy replied that he must be mistaken. What other personality could it be? Chen Gu explained that it was inside him. He knew how it had affected his life, and maybe he was trying to escape it. But some things you can't escape, no matter how well you pretend. Chen Gu asked Meng Nan to look at the photograph. It was a hospital room in Ward 3, where his mother had been treated. He asked him to focus on the door separating him from his mother. He explained that he was now near the room where his mother lived. He wanted the guy to help him close that damn door. He asked to awaken his second personality. It's the one he's currently searching for. But Meng Nan apologizes, saying he can't help him. He explained that he wasn't with him, locked behind that door. The protagonist was very surprised to find his younger self on the other side. Meng Nan replied that, frankly speaking, he was his true identity. His memories began at the age of 4. The main personality was born in a mental hospital and considered psychos. Until the age of 4, he tried his best to correct his viewpoint, and his only support was his mother. When his mother was murdered, the person who witnessed everything decided to abandon the normal world. One night, the hospital director and Dr. Chen arranged for him to fall asleep in the 3rd ward. He doesn't know what happened next. They probably gave him a sleeping pill, and while he was sleeping, they summoned the main personality. When he woke up, it was already midnight. He opened his eyes and saw the main personality nearby. He ordered him to keep it a secret from everyone and pointed to the clock in the hallway. He told him not to sleep. Then he led him out of the room. He remained outside the door and closed it. Chenji thought this explained why he couldn't resist the mirror monster. He, the only person who could close the door, had spent 10 years behind it. All these years the door was closed, and only 5 years ago, when the hospital closed, the door was opened again. Perhaps something had happened to Meng Nan's true identity behind the door. Chen Gei decided it would be best to retreat. The protagonist himself didn't understand what he was doing, why he was doing it, why he couldn't just give up. Could this really be all because of his parents? He really needs to figure this out and find clues to find his parents. The boy walked forward, making his way through the red haze. It was as if something was stopping him. The protagonist opened the door and managed to get in. The boy caught his breath. When he found himself behind the door, he was surprised. Could this really be the world behind the door? The walls, ceiling, and everything in this room are identical to what is in the real world, although there are still some slight differences. He was standing around the corner and looking at some doll. Then he walked on, wondering where Meng Nan's young self was. There was a pool of blood in front of him. He came closer and noticed that the puddle began to change, turning into a hand. It was brutal. A hand emerged from a pool of blood and began to crawl out. She pointed her finger in some direction. Was her hand really showing him the way? But where was it leading him? Shenja decided to follow his hand and go there. In front of him was a sign that read, "Electroshock Therapy." The protagonist opened the door, and a boy lay on the bed. Apparently, this was Meng Nan's younger self. The boy came as close to him as he could. He began to peer at the boy, and asked him to wake up. There was no answer. This seemed like an unusual dream. How could he wake him up? Chenga told the boy that if he didn't wake up, he would cut him down with his knife. He had the feeling that someone was holding the knife and not letting it go down to the boy's head. Then a man appeared behind him. He exclaimed that he had never thought that anyone else could get through the door besides him. The man said this was not the place for him to be. He asked them to leave the boy and leave quickly. Chenja wondered who this man was. He asked the man who he was and if he was the director of this place. The man asked him to be quiet. In this place, he is the only one who can communicate with him, and also the only one who can help him. He can leave at any time, but the boy will remain. He must remain in this room. Chen-ge said no. The man said he might not believe it, but they were now in this boy's nightmare. If anything happened to him or he woke up, they would be trapped here forever. The boy admitted that he thought it might be a nightmare. He leaned toward the man as he spoke. Well, if this is a nightmare, shouldn't it wake him up? The man's gaze changed. He exclaimed that the young men were very curious. He had told him that the boy would stay here. Chen-ge thought he was in trouble. He couldn't cope without Zhang Ya. The man said he wouldn't let this go so easily. He exclaimed that he would have to die here. A red haze enveloped the man. He began to approach the boy, but the latter froze in place. The ghost girl was already approaching him, her hair fluttering in the wind. She was very creepy and menacing in appearance. Her eyes glowed empty, with only small red lights burning in them. The protagonist exclaimed that Zhang Ya had come to save him. The ghost girl kept approaching the man. Chen-ge was glad that Zhang Ya had come to his aid. He asked if she had returned to look for him. Zhang Ya approached the man. He exclaimed that he had sent her away. Then why did she come back? The protagonist went to meet them. He told the ghost girl that he would help her. The boy grabbed his sharp knife and ran to help. Suddenly, someone grabbed his arm. It was a little boy, Meng-nan. The boy realized that he had finally woken up. The boy had a creepy look. Black, empty eyes with tiny dots for pupils. He hoped the boy wouldn't go berserk. Chen-gu explained that he did it to wake him up. He didn't mean to harm him. He knew about him and came here to save him. The protagonist said his alternate personality was attacked by a monster, but he saved it. He asked if he had a mother. The boy asked if Chen-ge could show him a photograph. The boy immediately handed it to him. He explained that the photo was of him with his mother, and he'd found it in the principal's closet. The old man had just said that this world was his nightmare, and when he woke up, the door connecting the two worlds would close. The boy asked if this was true. The boy replied that this world existed before him, but he was the first to discover it in this place, and that he shouldn't ask him about it. The more he learns, the harder it will be to leave. He can only say that this world reflects the darkest secrets of the human soul. It is filled with sin and horror. It is similar to the real world, but different from it as day from night. The boy exclaimed that he had more questions, and asked the boy not to leave. By this time, the ghost girl had already eaten the man's body. His head lay on her lap. Chen-ge noticed that she had already eaten his body. Only his head remained, which was terrifying. The protagonist asked the boy to stop. He begged him not to leave. The boy approached the ghost woman and asked her to leave the old man with him. Then he would let her go. Chen-gu told them both to calm down. They were all on the same side here. There was no need to harm each other. The head still begged to be let go. The girl carried him away in her hair. Chen-gu asked what mistake the old man had made. The boy replied that when the door appeared, the old man had been using patients as test subjects. He forced patients to walk through the door, including his mother. He's a very hypocritical and selfish person. It was because of him that several other patients suffered, and he eventually fell asleep. The head said that she took care of him after his mother died. Everything he did was for him. But the boy asked the head to shut up. He experimented on his mother, and then locked him in here. Did he think it was doing him any good? He turned his patients into monsters, bent on murder and torture. Does he really think that's good for them? The boy called him a hypocrite. He simply wanted to prolong his life behind that door. He wouldn't be able to deceive him again. Chen-gu told the boy that he had seen several patients in Ward 3 in the real world. Each one belonged to a skinny monster. The boy replied that indeed these were creatures that emerged from this side, but they were also the weakest. 5 years ago, 7 patients entered here, and 4 of them were possessed by the most powerful monsters. Patient number 4 suffers from phantom limb syndrome. Patient number 8 suffers from lateral space syndrome. Symmetry and harmony are not beautiful things for him. Patient number 5, who suffers from transformational personality syndrome, thinks that all people are the same person. Patient number 3 is his mother. He knows no one else, but there's someone he needs to be careful with. It was he who came up with the plan to lure him into a trap. Patient number 9, Fei. He has an excellent memory, but he doesn't communicate with others, thinking that everyone else is just trash compared to him. It was Fei who came up with the plan to lure him into a trap, but Wu Fei isn't that hard to deal with. He had to be extremely careful with the emerald-faced man. He's the most dangerous one. Chen-ge thanked the boy for the advice. He replied that there was no need to thank him, as he wanted to ask him for a favor. Chen-ge decided to try to lure him to his haunted house. He'd make a great companion. The boy said he'd help him. The boy explained that he was just a personality, and this hospital building was its container. They couldn't kill him, but they could influence him by harming his second personality. They can even control him with it, which is what worries him most. He asks for protection for his alternate personality. He has no one left in this world. He is his only friend. Chenge agreed. The boy explained that staying in this world for too long was harmful to his spirit and body. His mind could be damaged by an influx of negative thoughts. He would send him back. If any problems arise, come to him at midnight. He'll hold the door open for exactly 1 minute. That's the extent of his control. When the boy left, the boy had a feeling that the boy was hiding something from him. What exactly is he hiding? Chenge noticed that he was afraid of Zhang Ya. Then the protagonist heard his cat meow. He saw a white tigress standing before him. The boy was glad she hadn't abandoned him, but the cat looked at him strangely. Then he realized that Zhang Ya should have gone out with him. The animal saw that he was the one. The boy concluded that the cat was apparently also afraid of the ghost girl. He thanked Zhang Ya for saving him. If it weren't for her, he would have been in big trouble. He thanked the ghost girl again and exclaimed that he didn't know what he would do without her. He wanted to say something else to her, but she looked at him strangely. What has he been doing for the last 20 years? He can't even start a conversation with a girl, much less a ghost. Then the protagonist approached her and asked her to come home with him. Their level of affection increased. Soon, she would reach a new level, overcome with passion. The boy wondered why it sounded so dangerous. Zhang Ya might accidentally tear it apart in a fit of passion. In any case, the protagonist decided that it was too early to worry about it. He'd completely forgotten about Stream. He wondered if there was a connection behind the door. When he tried to contact them, the transmission was blocked. The boy couldn't figure out why. He asked Liu Dao why his live broadcast was blocked. Or maybe it was because the black screen was too long. There was an unfamiliar voice on the other end. He was told it was the city's investigative team. The police asked him to immediately tell them his location and then to slowly exit. Liu Dao asked the police officer to return his phone. The officer exclaimed that he was leaving and asked everyone to get ready. The protagonist was surprised by such a greeting. He was informed that he was surrounded and asked to raise his hands and remain still. The protagonist raised his hands, smiling strangely. The officer drew his weapon and asked him not to move. 2 victims were locked in the laundry room of Building 2. Chenge begged the police to help them quickly. He asked Liu Dao to keep an eye on the cat. The policeman ordered people to be sent there quickly. Chenzhou decided things were bad for him. It would be very difficult to explain everything to the police now. Would they believe him? Before us is the city police station. A huge, tall building rises straight up to the sky. The main character was asked to sit down and was told that the inspector would arrive soon. The policeman asked someone not to worry and said that they would express gratitude to those who took part in this. A couple was thanking the captain for his work. The policeman said it was his job and pointed to the boy. A man and a woman thanked a police officer for saving their daughter. The protagonist didn't understand what they were talking about. He turned his head towards the policeman. The captain, in turn, told the boy he didn't know what to say. They'd previously discussed at length whether he'd broken the law or not. If it weren't for him, the girl would have spent the rest of her life in a cage, and her parents would have lost all hope in their search for their only child. According to him, they also rescued 2 more, but those sick people ran away, and they were unable to find them. The policeman told the boy not to worry, as they had already begun an investigation and would find them soon. He'd done a good job this time, but they decided to temporarily ban him from live broadcasting. But as compensation, they will organize a recording of his merits. Chengyu thanked the captain. He said he had acted simply out of a heightened sense of justice. Sometimes he simply couldn't control himself. He asked Captain Yan if he was truly free. The captain replied that he didn't need to ask. They will never punish a person with a clear conscience and a heightened sense of justice. The protagonist walked out of the station and stretched joyfully. He said he was very tired. Liu Dao asked the boy if he'd solved all the problems. He explained that he'd waited for him at the station half the night. Hadn't he said that everyone in the hospital was just a bunch of actors with behavioral issues? He vouched for him to the cops, but they pushed him into hell. His staff were at the hospital too. He just didn't see them. Liu Dao said he didn't want to blame him, but he did find something a little odd. Usually when a person enters a mental hospital in the middle of the night and sees that there are victims locked in cages and killers are chasing him with axes, isn't he afraid? But the problem was that he was chasing the killers all over the building with a hammer in his hand. He had been working on this case for 4 years, but he couldn't even imagine that someone would actually start chasing the real killers. Chen Ge replied that he was exaggerating. He was simply doing what any law-abiding citizen would do. Frankly, he has a heightened sense of justice. When he saw the victims, he was so angry at the pain they had endured that his anger overwhelmed his fear. That's why he dared to pursue the killers. The friend replied that it was too late to say anything now, and that it was all his fault. He should have called the police right away. By the time he started broadcasting live, they'd already filed a complaint. The main thing is that he survived, but what was he even thinking? He asked the guy to leave and said he needed a break after that. He'd take a sedative, rest a bit, and then contact him. The system informed the protagonist that he had managed to reach the mission site on time and hold out until dawn. The boy was delighted with the reward. The mission completion rate was only 60%. He couldn't figure out why. Was Mung Nan's main personality hiding something from him, or was it somehow connected to the escape patients? Will that little boy be rewarded for his hidden mission? He saw many people before him. If he's not mistaken, today isn't a holiday, then why are there so many customers in front of him? He was met by Xiao Wan. She exclaimed to the boss that he was finally here. She explained that it seemed all these people had come because of yesterday's broadcast. The boy cast a strange glance to the side. A man greeted him. He looked different somehow, and he said he suspected his broadcast was staged. Chenju asked the guy who he was and why he said his broadcast was staged. The man replied that he was the manager of the world's largest mobile haunted house, Tianteng Medical School. His opinion carries a lot of weight in the horror house world. I watched his broadcast, so I came today to talk to him. Chenga asked if Tianteng Medical School was famous. Someone in the crowd replied that they were very famous. It was the largest moving haunted house available on the market at the time. They hired a professional haunted house designer from Japan with over 10 years of experience in the field. The makeup, costumes, and every detail of the interior were custom made. Everything there is frightening. The sounds, the lighting, the special effects, the smells. They strive for the most realistic horror, unlike some unusual haunted houses. The main character got very angry and asked if he came here to promote himself. But the man began inviting the boy to try out their haunted house. He hoped he wasn't afraid of visiting other people's haunted houses, and handed him a piece of paper. The guys around him were shouting that they wanted to see the boss in action. They asked him not to worry, because he'd been so brave last night. As soon as he walked in, they'd believe what had happened last night. The protagonist realized these people were in league with him. He agreed and said he was ready to witness this horror. Could Tianteng Medical School really be more terrifying than a real ghost? There was a huge line in front of him. It's probably because he's so popular. It's a good thing they decided to come to this city. Before this, they had planned to go abroad. The line for tickets is so long, you can't even see the end of it. One of the people exclaimed that he'd never visited a Japanese haunted house before, but he wondered what could be scarier than Ward 3. The man told the ladies and gentlemen that the long-awaited Tianteng Medical School had officially opened in Zhejiang. They strive for the absolute, for the most realistic horror, unlike haunted houses that rely on a 50% army. They think it's a clever move to boost their online profile, and some fall for these dirty tricks, but he finds this method laughable. Chen Gei realized the man was hinting at him. He said some people still doubted them, so they invited a special guest. He introduced the owner of the haunted house, Chen Gei. He asked for help connecting a microphone and a radio transmitter. Their organization has the most advanced equipment and personnel. If anything happens to him during the process, their people will be able to help him immediately. The woman who attached the sensor to the main character asked him to relax. The man continued to say that they would be able to monitor his cardiogram in real time through a projector. They'll hear certain events unfolding at the location. Now they'll select 3 more visitors to accompany Chen Gei. Chen Ge remarked that there was no need. Challenging the haunted house alone was much more fun. If he succeeded in scaring him, he'd admit his haunted house wasn't so scary, and he'll be advertising his haunted house on his website for a whole month. Just imagine, Tianteng Medical School is the best haunted house in Zhejiang for a whole month. The man replied that it was quite tempting, but how would they know they'd succeeded in scaring him? The boy replied that they'd installed a radio transmitter. A normal human heart rate ranges from 60 to 100 beats per minute. When a person is frightened, the oxygen level in the blood decreases, and the heart begins to beat faster. If his heart rate rose above 100, he'd lose. That was their agreement. Chen Gei asked him to take it slow, and asked what would happen if he lost. The man asked him not to worry if they lost, and they also admitted that their haunted house wasn't as scary as his. Everyone here would be their witness. Chen Ge replied that he actually had one small request. He thought there were still a few problems with his haunted house. He hopes his team will want to visit his haunted house. He's added a new scenario that hasn't yet been released to the public. The man listened to him and replied that it was no problem. He agreed to his challenge. Then he told the boy that once he entered this door, the game would begin. When Chen Gei walked through the door, he saw a man standing in front of him. He looked very much like a security guard. The man was clicking something on the computer. Important news appeared on the monitor. At the hospital, the police intervened to investigate. Chen-go realized that the key to moving forward must be the guard. This move was quite interesting. When the main character approached the guard, he asked what he was looking at. Then the guard pointed at the monitor screen. Beads of sweat were running down his cheeks as he pointed at the monitor. The protagonist noticed that the character stuttered. It was quite professional. The news reported that immoral doctors were selling patients' organs on the black market. Patients whose death has been documented returned the following day. The protagonist noticed that it looked quite realistic. He approached the monitor. Suddenly, the monster woman inside said something to him. She opened her mouth with sharp fangs and cried out that he would die. The guard grabbed his head with his hands and started screaming, frightened by this ghost. Chen-go remarked that it was a great scene, but they would only be able to scare him if she wore red. The man replied that their haunted house really was haunted. If he encountered anything strange, he should shout into the camera. Chen-jo asked that if there really was a ghost here, then at best it would be a lingering spirit. He wondered if he could use a similar technique in his haunted house. He decided to go over and see what was in front of him. The boy remarked that this puppet was very well made. They have such attention to detail, no wonder they are so popular. It's not a bad job, but it's still worse than the dolls in his haunted house. The boy looked at the inscription on the girl's dress, but suddenly his gaze fell on a box by the wall. He wondered what kind of box it was and what was inside. Surely someone must be hiding in the box. All visitors will be focused on the female body, and when they try to walk past it, the ghost will jump out at them from a box hidden in the corner. The main character really became interested, and he slowly walked towards the closet. The man inside is now waiting for him to pass by so he can jump out and scare him. The boy decided to play a song for the man hidden in the closet. He played the song on his phone and held it up to the drawer. The man hidden in the closet was surprised and wondered why this man had not yet come. But what took him by surprise was the sound of music nearby. The man in the closet was seriously frightened. Someone was telling him he was going to die soon. He was going to die today, and he wouldn't be able to escape. The boy couldn't understand the sound. He was seriously scared. The boy cowered inside and begged to be let out. He began knocking on the closet and begging for help. Chen-ge reached out and opened the drawer. The guy jumped out of the closet and ran away. The protagonist watched him with a smile. He came up behind him and grabbed him by the shoulder. He started coughing, and the guy from the closet started screaming. Chen-gu asked him not to be afraid and said he was just a visitor. He asked why the boy had fallen and if he was injured. The boy asked them not to touch him, as he could get up on his own. Chen-ge asked him if he was sure, since he was very pale. The guy replied that it was makeup and asked him to leave him alone. The boy asked him to be careful in this case. In front of him was Tiantang Medical School, and he warned that he had now officially entered Tiantang Medical School. The protagonist found himself holding a ball that had flown towards him. When he looked at it, it was the snarling head of a ghost. Catching her head, Chen-ge smiled and blushed slightly. He began to examine her, and he said that this head was very cute and the sound was pleasant. It did not stop growling, but then he heard another growl. A hand reached out to him and asked if he wanted to take it. The boy gave his head to the hand and said that, when he was 4 or 5 years old, he ran around with similar heads. The main character exclaimed that time flies by so quickly, childhood passed so quickly. The man behind the wall was very upset. He thought about how Chen-ge had been running around with similar heads at 4 or 5, and what kind of upbringing was that? Meanwhile, the main character was walking down the corridor and saw surgical rooms in front of him. He greeted him and said that if the man wanted to scare him, then he should scare him faster, otherwise he would go inside. The boy replied that he should come in. He would come in and experience true fear. The boy began to laugh. He opened the door and stood on the threshold. Before him stood people dressed in bloody clothes, as if with entrails. Chen-gu approached one of the dolls and said that Japanese and Western haunted houses are fond of this design. Why is each doll missing an organ? Or maybe it's a special request from the boss. One of the dolls had the name Shu Zhen on the tag. Could this be the woman who was shown in the video just recently? It doesn't look like they've been repainted to make them look older. It looks like all of this was taken from a real hospital. Lingering spirits usually attach themselves to the nearest object at the moment of their death. If all the props they got from a real hospital, there really could be a real ghost in that place. This room is connected to the autopsy room, and the video in the security office showed something about illegal organ sales. It must have happened here. This doll seemed unfinished to him. Coming closer, the boy noticed that she had no heart, and he became curious where it was. Could it be that the key was hidden in the heart? He decided that he needed to find her heart. He approached the girl and thought that most likely it was somewhere here. Suddenly, she seemed to come to life, opening her eyes. The girl began to scream, bloody tears streaming from her eyes. She began to stand up and say the word heart. The girl was very frightened, but the protagonist put his hand on her head and began to calm her down. He said everything was fine, after which the girl blended in with the other dolls. And how should he react to this? This had never happened to him before. The boy wondered what to do now. He called the girl beautiful and then asked her not to move. She was scared and couldn't understand what he wanted to do now. He was so close to her that she could feel his breath. She wondered what he would do next. The girl felt the boy was very close. He extended his hands towards her, and he exclaimed that he had found this heart. He took the heart in his hands and pressed it to himself. I knew the key was in the heart. The girl exclaimed that she forgot to put on makeup today. The protagonist walked further down the corridor. He approached a door and began to open it. Behind the door, the boy realized that a new scene had now opened up before him. The corridor narrowed by half a meter. It looked like something was hidden behind these walls. The protagonist realized he was right. The wall on the left was hollow. He glanced to the side. Above was the sign, Children's Ward. The boy noticed when he entered the children's ward that the acoustics here were very good. Suddenly, one of the children lying in the crib grabbed him by the jacket. The protagonist exclaimed that he had managed to catch it. The dummy had no movable joint in its arm. This means the child's arm is hollow. He might find traces of wires that could catch on his clothes when he passes by. The person controlling the doll must be very close. It has to be very close, otherwise the timing won't be so perfect. Based on this, he must be hiding under the bed. Chen-ge approached one of the beds. He lifted it and looked underneath. There indeed sat a dummy. Chen-ge wondered what he was supposed to be looking for here. When he entered, the guard hadn't said anything, so maybe he could. But the boy suddenly stood up and started running away. The protagonist asked where he was running. He should be the one who's afraid, not that guy. Chen-ge still didn't understand why he ran away. The doll the boy was holding had Shujen written on it. Why again? Ever since he entered the haunted house, he's been seeing that name constantly. It must be some kind of psychological trick. He glanced to the side. They had something else in store. Taking something that belonged to the victim would make you feel like you were being haunted by the dead victim. The note was written for her daughter, Shu Zhen. This note was probably made to increase visitors' fear of Shu Zhen's name. The protagonist decided to see who would win. He was going to leave them a little surprise. He added on the piece of paper that he had written it. The boy laughed and asked them not to be afraid. Suddenly he heard someone roar. A woman was carrying a cart full of dolls. She growled and approached the boy. These empty-eyed dolls smiled in the basket. The woman thought he was so scared he swallowed his tongue. But the boy simply looked at her intently. He realized that the most interesting thing was outside the room. Chen-ge smiled slightly. The girl assumed he was terrified, so he didn't even move. The protagonist approached him and said hello. She hadn't expected such a turn of events. He said there were no tracks on the floor, so the mechanism was hidden in the wall. She'd been squatting in the cart the whole time, which was quite ingenious. The woman asked why he was talking to her. The boy replied that her gaze evoked a feeling of resentment mixed with hatred. It truly did look like a real ghost. The woman thanked the boy. He said her gaze truly did resemble that of a real ghost. She was a great actress. The girl wondered after Chen-ge left what he meant when he said he looked like a real ghost. Had he really met them? The protagonist walked further down the corridor and peered into one of the rooms. He became curious about what was there. He saw a man lying in blood before him, and he wondered why the dead man's body looked so much like the young man who had been hiding under the crib. In front of the man was a radio with a cassette tape. Chen-ge started turning it on, checking whether it was a prop. There was a recording on the tape, someone asking for forgiveness. He was the director, and it was all his fault. She had nothing to do with it. The man asked Jen to run away quickly and said that Dad would hold them back. The protagonist realized that the local director was the girl's father. The boy became thoughtful. The man begged his tormentors not to harm his daughter. Following this, a girl's scream was heard and the director shouted at the girl to run. Her end was probably the same as her father's. Chen-ge saw a newspaper in front of him. It said that 4 years ago, a woman had snuck into an abandoned hospital to commit suicide. The woman's name was Shu Zhen. But 10 years earlier, she had committed suicide in her own office. No matter how realistic the actor's makeup is, visitors intuitively understand that it is fake. Therefore, they must create the image of a real ghost that follows the visitors. Zhu Zhen takes on this role, something that cannot be touched, a true ghost. Tiantung Medical School uses a real-life case to create its own haunted house. Aren't they afraid to summon the real Shu Zhen? The protagonist is completely unprepared for this. Who would have thought that you need to take any equipment with you when going to a haunted house? Zhang Ya, after absorbing the ghost, fell asleep and now ignores it. He hopes he got something. Coming empty-handed is no fun. Chen Go reached into his jacket. Inside was a cassette tape. He was delighted and remembered that it was the cassette that had fallen off the roulette wheel. He had completely forgotten that he had put it in his pocket. You can't find a tape recorder like that on sale these days. The boy put the cassette into the tape recorder, which was lying on the table. Now that one is right in front of him, he can use it to check the tape. Then something beeped. Just a monotonous sound. Chen Ge realized the tape was empty. He approached the dead man and asked if he was trying to take revenge for the humiliation in the children's ward. He said the guy was very dedicated, but in this situation he wouldn't be able to protect him. It turns out the guy wasn't dead. There were streams of blood running down his face, and on the tape, someone said he was in a lot of pain. The boy raised his head and said he didn't remember those words. He couldn't understand what was actually happening. Chen Go noticed that he was so engrossed in his acting that he didn't even notice he had changed the tape. Chen Ge asked if there was something wrong with his equipment. The guy replied that it seemed so, but the technical issues didn't affect the recording. It's just a technical problem and everything will be fine. Then a woman opened the door and told Brother Lin that they were in trouble. When asked, the woman pulled out some paper and told the guy she was back. Something appeared on the note. It was a note on which the protagonist added that he had written it. Looking at the paper, the boy noticed that the ink on it was fresh. The main character laughed and thought that he did it. The woman continued to say in fear that she was very scared if it could be her. They were both seriously scared. Could she really have come back? But the guy asked the girl to speak more quietly. The visitor was still there. Chen Ge said that if they didn't make this recording, then who could have? The woman replied that when they were in Shanghai, one of the visitors was so frightened that she left in tears. She said one of their actors was being too realistic, but in reality, where she was, nothing should have scared her. They asked her to describe the actor, and realized that her description perfectly matched Xu Zhen. Chen Ge thought the visitor was just playing a prank on them. He asked if it was a joke. The young man explained that this had happened more than once, and after that day, more and more visitors had seen Xu Zhen. Each of them has something to protect themselves from such things, but oddly enough, none of the workers had encountered Xu Zhen until that day. Chen Ge asked why. If the ghost existed, they insisted on using her name. Why did they scatter hints about her all over the house? Why weren't they afraid to summon her? The guy replied that they decided to use a scenario based on a real case. The case of Xu Zhen's suicide is quite well known. Visitors immediately recalled that incident when they saw her name. They were forced to do so, as the number of visitors had declined over the past 2 years. To maintain their popularity, they had to try something new. Suddenly, the tape started talking again. Someone kept reading, saying they were in pain.